Hi and welcome to this video. In this one, we're going to build a Kanban board. Very quickly before the start of the video, if you want to stay updated with the modern web development courses and content releases, please subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the video description. Happy coding and learning. The aim of this project is to teach you Redux from the ground up, what it is, what we use it for. So let's just dive in and let's see what this project does. So this project is an extremely simple project. I just wanted to show you how Redux works and teach you that the basic ideas behind Redux for state management in the context of a very simple project. So here we have this page right here. Here it says My Boards, the title, and then we have the ability to create a new board. So as soon as I click on that, we have a form right here. And in this form, I could say board 1. And as soon as I hit enter, that is going to create the board. But what it does is it's going to navigate us to that specific page for that board or to that board itself. So when you're navigated here, you have 3 different columns. You have the to do right here. Then we have the in progress, and then we have the done. And the idea behind these 3 columns is that if you were to go ahead and to create a card, let's say card 1, and as soon as I hit enter, that's going to create the card for me. And it's also going to provide me with the date when the card was created. Now, why is this a Kanban board? Because you can just click on this, drag it, and put it in the in progress. Or if this card or this feature or whatever this is done, you can just put it right here. But initially, once you create a card, it is going to go into to do because that's the initial state for the card. But then you can always put any card anywhere you want. And this is going to be the second page of our application. From here, we have this back button right here where we can go back. So if I click on this, we're going to go to our boards. This is one board, as you can see, board 1, and this board has 2 cards right here. All right, so I'm going to click on this board. I'm navigated to here. We're going to use React Router for routing of this app because I just want to make it simple and I just want to focus more on how Redux weaves into this application. Now, the next functionality that this app has is you can add some description for your card and you can change some card details as well. So if you click on any of these cards, you're going to be navigated to another page. And in this page, we can already see the title. We can add some description. So I'm going to say some description. Of course, this is not going to be shown when you're viewing the cards, but you can always see it if you come to this page. And you can also change the status of this card from here as well. So here we can just put it in done, and the date as well as the time is also listed here. We're going to save the changes, and now you can see both of them are in done. So I'm going to click on card 1. I'm going to change the status to do, save changes. It's going to jump into to do. So you can either drag and drop it, or you could change the status by going to that card. And much like with any other app, this is going to be fully responsive. It doesn't matter how many cards there are or how big or how small the screen is. So let me just put that there as well. Let me create another card, card 4. Let's put that there. You can see it's fully responsive. There we go. We're not going to talk about the CSS, the Tailwind CSS styles for this app. I'm just going to give it to you, but rest assured, it's fully responsive. Now I'm going to go to our boards page. In here, I could create another board. I just want to show you the responsiveness of this app. There we go. You can see every time it acts a little bit swiftly, that's where there is a breakpoint. Right there. And then another one is right here. You can see There we go. And it is time for us to get started with this project. And in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our terminal. And let me just bring this up. I've opened up an empty folder inside of VS Code, and we're going to get started with this. Let me just do this. So we're going to have npm create vite as latest. And we could say Redux Kanban. Enter. This is going to be a React TypeScript project. Very good. So there are going to be some dependencies, of course, for this project that we need to install. So far, we just have our React DOM, we have our TypeScript, but we need to install Tailwind CSS as well. We need to install some other stuff as well, like routing, React Router for routing. Let me zoom this out. Let's try to install all of them. So for Tailwind CSS, I'm going to say in npm install -d Tailwind CSS at Tailwind CSS /vite plus out of prefixer. Let's install all of that. And this is going to take a few seconds. And should be almost done. There we go. So we installed Tailwind CSS version 4. Now let's jump into the Vite configuration. In here, I'm going to say import Tailwind CSS from at Tailwind CSS Vite. And the only thing we need to do is we need to put it right here as well. There we go. I am going to jump into my source. This index.css, I'm going to select everything, delete it. And in here, I'm going to say add import Tailwind CSS. Let's save this. Now that I'm here, there were some styles that I would like to apply here. There is a custom breakpoint that I've added that's at 500. Because Tailwind CSS doesn't have that. Tailwind CSS breakpoints start from 640. That's the smallest one. But for this app, for the responsiveness part, I had to create a custom one. And you can take a look at this. This is the new way of, this is the version 4 way of coming up with the Tailwind configuration. Because Tailwind configuration version 4 doesn't have that config file. Everything comes into this index.css. And in here, this is how we implement theme. So we're going to have some basic colors. And these colors are going to be custom ones. We have primary dark, light, dark, and dark lighter. And then we have the dark light, something like that. So here we have the body, some styles applied on the body. And then we have the buttons. Since buttons do not have that cursor pointer effect, I've added this here. So now that this is done, let's save this and let's close that. And let's go ahead and let's install the rest of the packages. So we still need to have our React router. So npm install React router DOM at latest. Let's install this one as well. And then we are going to install Lucid React for icons. npm install Lucid React at latest. The icons are coming from here. The reason that I'm going this one by one is so you can see how this project is getting set up from the ground up. And I think we should be done in this department, except for Redux, of course. So for that one, I'm going to say npm install. Let's first install Redux. Hit enter. And that has installed Redux version 5. And then we're going to install React-Redux. Hit enter. And there we go. We should be done. If there is anything missing, I would take care of it as well. So we're done here. We're done here. And let's jump into here. So in here, we no longer need this app.css. So I'm going to get rid of that. We don't need this public, but I'm going to keep it there. We don't need this assets. Let me just delete this as well. What else? So in the app, get rid of everything. I'm going to say export default function app. Let's zoom this in. And the only thing this is going to do is this is going to say main board page for now. Let's run the server. So we're going to say npm run dev. And then there we go. We can see what we're doing. So since we're using React Router DOM, I'm going to get started with the routing of this application at first. That's going to be the first thing that I'm going to do. So we use React Router because we want to implement some routing inside of our application. And the reason that we do that is so when we navigate from one page to another page, we don't have to refresh the browser. Now, we do not persist these boards anywhere. So if I were to refresh the page, you can see all of them are gone. Now, if you want that functionality, you're welcome to implement it. But I'm not going to implement it because that's besides the point. I've done that several times in this tutorial series. You can just go ahead and watch any of the previous projects. So here we have this board. And if I click on this, you can see this navigation changes. We go to some other page. If I create a card and click on that, I go to some other page. So this going from one page to another page, that's called routing without refreshing the page. So for this one, if we want to implement some routing, we need to have some routes, of course, right? Now, each route is going to be an object because it contains more than one kind of information. If it has only one kind of info, that's an array. If it has more than one kind, that's an object. So that's why routes are objects. So now, since our entire application is going to be one route, one main route, and several children routes, I'm going to have one object inside of my routes array. Now, why is routes an array? Because sometimes you have more than one routing layout for your application. For this one, we just have one. If you had two kinds of routing, you would add another one right here. But since we just have one, we're going to add it here. Now, the first one is going to be, the way that we go about this is you have a path that the user can go to. So if I were to provide a / after our port, which is 5173, hit enter, this is our path right here. So the main path is always going to be the /. Now, when user goes to this path, what should the user see? That's what this element is responsible for. So when the user goes there, I want the user to see the component, which is called layout, which we are yet to create. And if the user goes to any part of our application that we do not have a component to show HTML for, we are going to throw an error and we're going to show this component. This is the error component. So any path that we have not handled in this object will be handled by this not found page. Now, since this is going to have children, we're going to use the children array right here. Now, within this children, we could have as many sub children or as many routes as we want. So what is the next route that we want? Now, I want layout to handle the main page, but layout is just responsible for showing the layout of the page. It's not responsible for displaying the content of the page. So the content of this path, this / which is the main path, the content of this comes from another component. The layout comes from layout, but the content comes from a component that's going to be called boards list. Cool. So this is the first child route. Now, as many items are there within this array, we're going to end up with those many child routes. So here I could just copy this, paste it down below. What is the next route? Now, naming these routes, it's up to you. Now, if I create a board, take a look at this. So we have localhost 5173. If I create a board, and if I say board 1, create, you can see it says boards. And then we have a lot of, I don't know what this is. See, there's a lot of letters, and we have alphanumeric. We have an alphanumeric sequence. This is called an ID. So each board that we create is going to be a unique board, and no two boards are going to have the same ID. So you can see this board has an ID that ends with C212. If I were to create another board, hit enter, it ends at 6EF1. So each of the boards has a different ID. So what is this path? I could name it whatever I want. Now for boards list, I have named this the /, but then since I want this application to be as simple as possible, we're going to have the same component responsible for two different pages. All right. So one page is this one right here. So if I were to get rid of this, hit enter, I would be refreshing the page. Therefore, the boards are going to go away. So this is what this path is responsible for. Now, if I create a board, hit enter, come back, you can see, even though we are on the main page of our application, it has this / boards. So we're going to have the same component responsible for two different paths. And this is going to be the boards path. And then after this, we have the same thing, and we tag onto it this alphanumeric sequence. So let me just copy this. We tag onto it this alphanumeric sequence. So how do we tag onto it? Well, the way you do that is you always separate it with a /. Now, is this alphanumeric sequence or ID the same thing for all boards? No, we already established that. Each board is going to have a different one. And do you know, can you guess what's going to be the ID for like the next board? Like guess. What is going to be the ID for this board? You can't guess it. This is like a big number. You cannot guess it, what that is. So this is called a dynamic route. A dynamic route is the kind of route that is generated automatically based on some uniqueness, which is an ID in this scenario. So instead of hard coding this, we are going to say this is a dynamic route, and this colon represents that. So this colon here, it says this is a dynamic route. And when the user goes to this dynamic route, we should show another component, that is board detail. There we go. And if I create a card, add it. Now this card belongs to board 2. So if I click on this card, I should go to the card that belongs to this 3931 ID. So if I click on it, you can see we have this 3931, we add onto it a card, and then we add onto it what seems to be another ID, which is a sequence of alphanumeric characters. So if I were to create another path, what should that be? We're going to keep the previous ones. We're going to add a /. We're going to say card as it is there. And then we need another dynamic route. And this time it's no longer board ID, it is card ID. And when the user goes there, what kind of HTML will the user see? That's what this card detail is going to be responsible for. And that's it, that's our routing. Now we need to initialize this as well. So I'm going to say const router. Router is going to be this is basically going to be a function that we import from React Router DOM that handles all of the routes for us. And then we would want, let me just lowercase this, we want to have this route surround our entire application. And for that reason, we are going to say, let me just come here. I'm going to grab this export default. Let's just cut it, put it at the end. We're no longer returning a simple string. What we want to return is all of these routes. So we have something that's called provider. It's actually router provider right here that we import from React Router DOM. This is going to accept an object which is called router, which we have already created. So let me just put that right here. And this is a self-closing one. Let's save that. And now the only thing else in here, let me just remove this, that we need to create is we need to create all these components. So let's just go ahead and let's create it. We have layout. I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to call this layouts. And within layouts, I'm going to create a file layout.tsx. These components, they're always going to be .tsx. So export default function layout, and the only thing this is going to do is just going to say the word layout. We'll close that. So this component is done. Now I can just import it. Very good. Copy this, and in here I'm going to create another folder. Let's call this pages. All of our pages are going to come right here. Not found.tsx. I'm going to complete this because I don't want to come back to it again. And in here, we're going to say export default function. This is going to be not found page. Now, what do I want to do here? So if I come to this page, how do I come to this page? If I go to a URL that doesn't exist inside of my application, what does that mean? It means that I have not provided a component for that path. Then this page is going to handle that. Now, this is very normal. Any website has this. So if I get rid of all of that and hit enter, you can see we have this 404 page not found. And from here, you can click and you can go to the My Boards page because we do not handle all of the pages. Now, let me import this from Lucid React. And then where is the rest of this? I'm gonna pass in our navigate. Now, what is this navigate? Use navigate. I'm gonna come back to this when we actually create the rest of our pages. And you're gonna understand it there. And once you come back to this page and read it, you're gonna understand it. So this is gonna be, if I go to that page again, not found, it could be any page. That doesn't exist. So if I come right here, I have a section, I have an H1, I have a paragraph, a button. Within the button, I have a text that says back to boards. And then we have this home icon and it says 404 page not found. And if you click on this home icon, it's going to go to the home. That's the 404 not found page. Okay, we have the boards list. That's going to be another page. And export default function, and then the name of the function. And for now, let's just return that string. Save this, close this, and let's import this. There we go. And the final two pages are board details. We could say board details, right? So let me just copy this. Put that there, TSX, export RFC React functional component. Yep, that's what I want. We don't need this. Yeah, I just did a shortcut. I don't want to waste too much of your time. Let's put that there. Let's save this. Perfect. Enter that. This could be card details as well. Copy and put it there. .tsx RFC. Hit enter. Let me remove this and save that. Very good. And the final one is going to be that. Now let's test our application. So I am right here. Here we have our layout. That's the main page, but the layout's job is not to show this text. Its job is to show the layout of our page. So let's fix that so we can actually take a look at our routing. So I'm going to jump into the layout. Instead of displaying that, we're going to return something else. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a main HTML element, and within here there is something that's called an outlet component that is given to us by React Router DOM. And the job of this outlet is to act as a placeholder. So this main component, if I am on the boards page, it's going to contain all of the boards. So the outlet is going to be replaced by the boards. If I'm on the individual board, it's going to be replaced by all the buttons and the columns. If I'm on the card, this is going to be replaced by the card content. This is just a placeholder to show where the HTML elements need to go. And that's it. And for this one, I'm just going to add a p-6, which is a padding class. Now, as soon as I did that, you can see we have our boards list. We could go to /boards, hit enter. We should still see our boards list. Now, let's take a look at that here. Now, if we were to go to any specific ID, now, since we don't have any kind of ID, we could let's see if that works. If I do 1, 2, 3, hit enter, you can see it says board details. Since it is dynamic, it could be anything. You can see we have this board details. And now you might be asking, okay, if I write anything here, it's going to be handled by this one. What about this not found page? Now you can see it is being added as an ID to this board. Whenever you are handling dynamic routes, you never type that dynamic route. You click on something, and then that something is going to navigate you to that dynamic route. You never type it. So you never have to memorize that. Now, if you type something and you make a mistake like this, then this 404 page is going to come into the picture. You're never going to type that. So you're going to create a board, you're going to say 1, create it, and you can see this ID has been generated for you. You don't have to type it. That's why, that's the difference between the dynamic route, the dynamic route and the not found page. The not found page is something that doesn't actually exist. All right. So, and I've already shown you an example of that. And now let's take a look at this card. So if I were to add some sort of an ID, and then I were to add a card, and then some sort of another ID, hit enter. Let me just provide it here. So we have boards, some sort of an ID, and then card, some sort of another ID, hit enter. You can see we are navigated to our card details page. Very cool. So now that our layout and routing is done, let's close this. The layout is also done. We are going to get started with the board details. So how is this JSX, aka HTML, is going to look like? So for me, the way that I'm going to go about this is I'm going to have a section element. This is going to wrap the entire boards page. But this section element is going to be this is going to replace the outlet. So at the end of the day, this section element is going to be one element within our main element, within the layout. So now that you know that, let's go ahead and let's create a board. Let's just call it 1. And I'm going to take a look at the HTML. This is going to give you a very good idea of how I come up with the HTML. So here we have our main element. Within the main element, we have a section. And within the section, we have 2 different parts now. We have one div that contains the title and that button that creates a new board. We have another div that contains the actual boards that we create. But this form element is going to serve as a third child within the section element. So this section element is going to have 3 direct children. 2 of them are going to be divs. So that's one div. One is going to be a form. Let's get rid of the action. And the last one is going to be a div as well. So for the first one in here, I'm going to have an h1. This is going to say my boards. This part is simpler to implement. We're going to have a button. This button is going to say new board, but we need to import that plus icon as well. So this is going to be plus. Let's import it from Lucid React. Let's close this, and I'm going to add a class to it, and I'm going to say this should be size, I don't know, like 20. There we go. And we're going to implement some logic on this button, but for now, let's just go over the HTML, and then we're going to implement the logic part of it. And for the form, so the first div is done. Let's talk about the form. within the form, we have one input element that is where we write the board title. The type of this is text. This is going to have a placeholder that's going to say board title. After that, there are going to be some functionality for this input, which we're going to implement in just a moment. And then this is going to have two buttons. So since there are two buttons and those two buttons have different layouting options, I'm going to provide them within a div. One of the buttons is going to have, let's come right here. This is going to have a type of button because these buttons, they have the ability to submit the form. And that's how I want to use these buttons. The second one, or the last one, is going to have a type of submit. This is going to say create. The one that has a type of submit is going to say create. And the one that is a simple button, that's going to say cancel. Cool. And I think we're done with the form. Let's come to the final div. Within this div, what we want to do is we have all of our boards somewhere in the state management part of this application. And that's Redux. So our boards are in there. So what we want to do is we want to iterate over all of our boards, and in each iteration, we want to show one of those boards. So when we iterate, what do we want to show? I'm going to provide that here, but then I'm going to show you how you can do this dynamically. For now, this is just going to be one hard-coded board. This is going to have some classes, which I'm going to apply in just a moment. So for this div, there is going to be, let's just provide another div inside of here because there are going to be two items. So we have that icon for the div. Now these divs, the idea behind these is just for laying out purposes. There is no other idea behind there. So it doesn't have anything to do with the functionality. So I have this layout icon that I am going to insert from Lucid React. Let's give it a size 8. Let's close this. And within this div, we also have an h2 that is going to be the board title. So for now, I could just hard code this board title. But then again, this should be dynamic depending on what board it is that we're creating. So after that, we are going to get out of that div, that layout and h2 div, and we're going to have the number of cards that board might include. So I'm going to have, like, let's say 2 cards. But this 2, it has to be dynamic, depending on how many cards there are for any individual board. Now let's save everything. Let's come right here. And is the server running? Server is running. Board, I think I made a mistake. We are creating this inside the board details. We shouldn't be creating that here. This should go within the board list. So I'm just gonna grab everything, cut or copy everything, and then I'm gonna Control Z. I accidentally put it right here. We should go to the boards list page, grab everything, do that, and instead of this board, it is boards list. Let's save this, and there we go. So we have all of our content. I'm going to pause the video, implement all of the Tailwind classes. That's besides the point of this video, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to explain how we implement the functionality. And here we go. I've applied all the styles, even though the content is it's hard-coded, it's not dynamic. You can see it already looks like our completed project. So what do we do now? We have all of our HTML, we have all of the classes for Tailwind, which we call like now JSX. So we have all of that. What I'm going to get started with is going to be this board title. What is this? So when we're creating a board, we want to grab something that's called the board ID. That's something that we do behind the scenes, but something that the user sees is the board title. So when you're creating a board, there are 2 things involved in that process: the board title, the board ID. The board ID is necessary because we want to keep track of which board has which cards. So you need to be able to distinguish between the boards. That's why you give them IDs. Now, where do we handle the title? We handle it within this within this input statement right here. So the way we go about this is we are going to create an event on this. We are going to implement an event, and that event is basically going to take a look at changes for us. So within this input element, we are going to have an onChange handler. The onChange handler looks for any key presses that the user does within this input. So when the user writes board 1, the onChange is going to look for BOARD, so like for individual changes inside of the inputs. And then as soon as it finds any of these individual changes, it is going to send them individually to React. And React is going to keep track of this using a hook that's called useState, because we want to change the UI. And then we use the latest value that React has gotten from this onChange on the input, and we update the title with that value. So now we want to call this onChange whenever the user does something. But what is going to be the method that's going to tell React what the user has written? That's going to be a state setter function. So I'm going to call that set new board title. Why new board title? Because whenever you click on that form, there is going to be a new board. There is not going to be a previous board re-editing. No, just new board. So this is going to be a state setter function. Now, once React gets the updated value for the board title, how does React show it? Well, we have this value attribute, and we show the state variable right here. So we have a method. We created a method that's called setNewBoardTitle. This method is going to change the state variable every time user types something. But how do we get it back? We get it back using something that's called new board title. This is going to be our state variable, and set new board title is going to be the function that's going to update this new board title, this state variable. And whenever you want to take a look at what the user has written, we have an event. That's going to be an event. And how do you take a look at what the user has written? You have e.target, event.target.value is going to give you that. Now let's go ahead and let's create these states. So I'm going to come to above. I'm going to come now, since we are talking about hooks, they should be top level. And for this one, we have our use state. Let's import it from React. Now, what is going to be the initial state for this one? When we create a title, what is the initial state? So initially, let's just remove this cancel. When I click on this new board, what happens initially? Well, initially the title is an empty string, and the title is null. It's nothing. Why an empty string? Because we don't want to mess with the type of that, because it's either going to be a string, which is empty, or a string that is a word. So at the end of the day, the type is always going to be a string. Now, when we talk about this use state gives us two things specifically. It gives us a state variable that we use in order to basically set the new value of that input. And then we have a method that is going to calculate the new value for that state. So new board title. And let's initialize this as well. And let's save this. So we created this. The next step for me is to show you how to actually handle the creation state of any board. So we need to have some sort of a state in order to take a look at whether or not we want to show this form. So if I go to this page, reload everything, you can see initially I'm not showing this. But then I need to have some sort of a Boolean value. When I click on this, then I want to show this. But these two are completely different. Why are they different? The button that I clicked on, it's right here. That's the button. But I want this button to show this form. You can see they are in completely two different spots. So what I can do is I can extract the state of this button, lift it up to the parent element, which is the section, and put it right here. And then from the parent, I can give it back to the form. In that way, there is going to be a direct relationship between this button and this form element. All right. So at the end of the day, I want to have a relationship between this button and this form element right here. And the best way for us to do it is to just lift it up to the parent element, which is right here, which is in here. And then from here, share it with the form. So how do we do that? Because we want to show form conditionally. We don't want to show it all the time. We only want to show it when we click on this new board. So for that, we could create a new state variable. Why state? Because we change the UI. We change how the website looks. How do we change it? Well, now the website looks like this. When I click, it looks like this. So it changed. That's why we need useState. Now you could call this whatever you want. I'm going to say is creating. It means we are in the process of creating a board. You could call it is creating a board, or in the process of creating a board. And then this useState hook gives you a method to change the state from one, basically from one situation to another situation. And that should be called is creating. Now keep in mind these names, new board title, set new board title. This could be whatever you want, but make sure these are they make sense, because if they don't make sense, you write whatever, your application is not going to work and you're just going to confuse yourself. Now, this useState hook, it requires an initial phase, an initial thing, an initial state. What is initially for this one? So initially, we don't see the form. So initially, this is going to be false. Now, I'm going to grab this is creating. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to come right here. Let's just paste it right here. So if this is true, it means I'm in the process of creating the form, then I want to show the form. Otherwise, I don't want to do that. And we can easily do this with this double ampersand. So let's just put it on the same line. And now it doesn't work. Why? Because we're trying to do something programmatic inside of our what's called JSX or HTML. Now you need to surround it with a pair of curly braces, and now we can see it has syntax highlighting. It's escaping back into JavaScript. And now let's save it, and there we go. Now if I come right here, you can see we don't see the form anymore because is creating is initially false. Now how do we determine that is creating is true? Whenever we click on this button. So on this button, I need to have an onClick event. When I click this, I need to run a function. What is that? That is creating. And what do I change the value of the state with? I change it from false to true. So now if I click on this, you can see we have the form. And if I click cancel, it doesn't work because on the form, the button that has cancel, I didn't apply any event listeners. So the button is not dynamic. It doesn't do anything. But this new board button, it does something, right? So if I click on this, you can see it shows me that. There we go. Very cool stuff, right? And now you can see why we use these state variables and what is the idea behind them. So let me collapse this div. Let's talk about the form. This is the most interesting part. Now, whenever I write something, let's say 123, that is the name of the board, and I create it, I send this information to my store, which is Redux. Now, why is it called the store? I'm going to get back to this whenever we go to our Redux, and I'm going to explain to you why it is called the store and why do we, how does it work actually. But for now, what we want to do is I want to send this 123 along with the identifier of this board to my Redux. And then I want to retrieve it back again as well. Why? Because once I send it, I need to get it back in order to show it inside of the browser. Now this board title, 2 cards, this is something that I've hard-coded. I don't want to hard-code it. I want it to be dynamic depending on however many boards I have. So this form element is going to have an on submit. So whenever I click this create button, it should submit the form and all the info with it. And there are 2 information. One is the board ID and the other one is the board title. So on submit, I'm going to call a method that is called handle create board. Let's go ahead and let's specify this. Now you can see I'm putting this on the form because this is the proper way of doing it. This is the accessible way of doing it. So if I were to create a new board 456, I could click on create, or I could hit the enter key. If you want the enter key to work, you need to use the correct event handler. And that is, you have a button that has a type of submit, right? Whoops. I'm doing a lot of shortcuts. So you have a button that has a type of submit, and on your form, you have an on submit handler. And then this button create is going to submit the form. Cool. So let's go ahead. Let's copy this name. I'm going to come right here. I'm going to say function, and let's put it there. This is not going to accept any kind of information, but then it is going to try to submit the title of the form. So first off, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to take a look at whether or not the user has provided a title. What if the user hasn't provided anything? If the user hasn't provided anything, I don't want to send anything to my Redux store. So in here, I'm going to say if new board. Now you can see these names they make sense and they're really important, these state variables. If this is empty, it means this is not true, this is false, then I don't want to do anything. But if there is some title, I want to trim it. Why? Because there might be some spaces at the start and at the end of it. I just want to get rid of all of those spaces. Now, once I I have the board title, I need to create the board ID as well. And we have this crypto.UUI, random UUID, which is universal unique identifier, which is going to generate that crazy sequence of numbers, alphanumeric characters that I showed you. So it's going to generate something like this. String, and then another one, another one, another one, another one. You don't have to worry about it. The only thing that you need to know is every board is going to be unique, so React doesn't mix them up. And so there is going to be a lot of stuff happening within here that we have not actually talked about that I want to talk about here. Now, after creating the ID, I have the title, I created the ID, I need to send this to my Redux. How do I send it? So in here, I'm going to say to do send title and ID to Redux. I'm just going to put that there. So that's one. To do, I could call it to do one. And then once I create that board, let's say 789, I need to redirect the users to that board's specific page. So you could call that to do two. Now, I'm not going to implement to do one because that's a little bit more complicated. We could implement to do two. Let's go ahead and let's implement to do two. But before implementing that, what else do we do here as well? Well, if I take a look at that, if I create any board, I would want to make sure that this input is empty, because if it is not empty and the next time I want to create a board, this 456 or 789 would already be written inside of there. So that's very easy. I could say set new board title and I could revert it back to its initial state. So that part is done. We could also get rid of this form because once I create a board, I'm navigated to that board's page. And when I come back, I don't see the form. So set is creating is also set to false. So we don't show the form. And now let's navigate the users. So how do we navigate them? We have a hook on React Router DOM that is called use navigate. Everything starting with a use, that is a hook. So we have this use navigate, which I just imported right here from React Router DOM. The idea behind this is to navigate users from one page to another page when an action happens. So where do we want to navigate the users? Now this use navigate hook, this gives us access to something that's called a navigate function. Const. And let me initialize that. So this navigate function, we can use it to navigate users to wherever we want. We could even navigate them to a 404 page after they create a board. That's not ideal, but we could technically do that. So in here, I'm going to say navigate. Where do I want to navigate the users to? That's a little bit something that we need to think about it a little bit. So we need to navigate users to that board's specific page. So we have the main or the home route. We have, after that, we have the boards. So how do we determine that? Let's say this is going to be our home route. Then we have the boards. We have another /, and then we have the ID for that specific board. Well, I didn't memorize that. How do I know what ID that is? Well, I just created that right here. It's the same ID because we want to navigate users to the same page. Now, I'm trying to use a variable inside of a string. The value of a variable, how do I do that? Well, I need to convert this to backticks, and using ES6, we can use template literals. I'm just going to pass an ID. So we want to navigate users to the same board that they just created. That's why their ID is the same thing. Now keep in mind, all of this is done. The only thing remaining is to send this information to our Redux. But before actually talking about our Redux Store and why it's called a store, I feel like I need to complete the functionality of these two buttons. It's extremely simple. So for the button that has the text create, we're not going to do anything since it has a type of submit. It is automatically going to submit this for us. But the one that has a type of cancel, it should cancel the form. So once when we have that, when we say create, you can see we go to a question mark right here because we don't have any data, we don't have anything. But once I click on cancel, it should cancel this form. How do we cancel the form? Well, we can cancel it if we set this is creating to false. So in here, I could say on click. Now, I am passing a function within this onClick handler. The reason for that is because we want to call this set is creating to false when we click the button. If you don't pass in the function, as soon as the page loads, it's going to call that, and it's going to keep calling it because it's a state function, state setter function, and you're never going to see the form. So I'm in here, I'm going to say set is creating. Let's set it to false. We actually say we want to run this function whenever we click on that button. So I click, I see the form, I cancel, I don't see the form. So now that this part is done, let's go ahead and let's talk about our Redux. So let me just bring this here. So the way Redux works is that it stores all of our app's application state in one place. And that's why we call it a Redux Store, because it stores all of the application state in there. What is the application state? And a state is a component's memory. So whatever you do inside of web development is you deal with data. In this scenario, we talk about the board title as well as the board ID. So the title of the board is data. The ID of the board is also data. And we want to handle that. The reason that we want to handle that correctly is because once I create a specific board, like let's say this 456, I click on this board, I am navigated to that exact board. I create a card. I say 456-1, create the card. And now if I go back, I can see the same board, but now it has one card. Well, it should be one card, not one cards. Let me say 4562, add that. And if I come right here, now you can see it says 2 cards. Why do we need state? So when I go from one route to another route, I have access to the same information. If I go to this board, I have 2 cards here. If I go back, I have 2 cards here. Now, why we need Redux? Redux is another way of managing the state. So far, you have seen the simplest way to manage state within a React application is using useState. This is the most rudimentary and simplest way. Why did we use that? Because we wanted to take a look at the title. So here I have board 1. That's the title. So that's that title, board 1, we stored it within this board title, new board title. Now, in the next iteration, you change this, you create a different board. And in that scenario, we call the set new board title. So it's not going to be always the same title. The title is going to be changing. That's why we need to have a variable and then a function that changes the value of that specific variable. And this is the simplest way of state. And that's why these applications work, because you keep data and you keep it between different renders. So you keep it here and then you keep that here. So we keep 4, 5, 6 here inside of this boards page, and then we keep it here. And then even if I go to that specific card, I still am within that 4, 5, 6 page. I still am in there. So this is why we need state. Why Redux? Because Redux is a different way. You could do the same thing that I'm about to do here with the context API of React. In fact, if you haven't watched any of the previous videos in this series, I have created applications with the context API. I have created application for state management with use reducer. I've created an application with ZooStand, which is another library for managing the state, for managing data between different renders. And now we have Redux. So if you have watched the reducer one, Redux is based on reducers. So if you understand the use reducer hook of React, Redux is going to be very simple for you to understand. And what is the use reducer? Use reducer hook and use state are almost the same thing. It's just use reducer is a little bit more advanced than use state. So at the end of the day, if you understand use state, you understand everything. So understanding use state is going to help you to understand use reducer, and understanding use reducer is going to help you to understand Redux. Don't get me wrong, using Redux for this application is an overkill. You can easily do it even without the context API. But recommended is just the context API because that is native to React. Redux and React are two different things. Redux is a library of React. It could be discontinued in 5 years. I don't know. But context API is always going to be here until the team that created React, they're going to discontinue it. Okay? So always make sure that you understand the native way of doing something, and then you rely on the library way of doing that same thing. And we use Redux, ZooStand for larger applications, not like these kind of CRUD apps that basically these are like to-do list apps. We don't use it for this, but this is a very good context in order for you to understand what Redux is and what it does. So now that you know all of this, and I talked really a lot, let's go ahead and let's see how we want to do this. And we're going to get back to this to-do that we have here. So within this to-do, I want to send the information that is the title and the ID to my store. Why is it called a store? Because it stores state. What is state? It's data between different renders, between different pages, between different loading of the page. That's state. So here we have a method that's called dispatch. And I'm going to tell you where this is coming from. And this dispatch is going to send the ID as well as the title to our store. But within the store, we should have some sort of a method to handle that. And I'm going to call that function createBoard. That's why this function is called handle createBoard. So once we call createBoard, what do we pass? We pass in the ID for this board as well as the title. Where is the title? The title is within that state variable. It's a new board title. And there we go. So now what is this dispatch? What is this createBoard? CreateBoard is the function that's going to create a board. We created within the store momentarily within Redux. But this dispatch, the job of this is exactly the same thing as the dispatch within a user reducer. So the dispatch sends the action that the user has done to the reducer function. The reducer function calculates the dispatch in the form of a payload. For good reason, it's called payload. And it it takes that, it calculates the next state, and then it sends back the next state so we can show it inside of our application. And in simple terms, that's what we do. Now, once the store, the Redux store, sends back something, we need to select it and show it inside of our web page. For that, we have this use selector hook from our Redux, which I just imported. So if I come right here, you can see it says use selector. I imported that from Redux. So in here, let's take a look at the dispatch. So I'm going to say that's going to be another hook, use dispatch. I just imported that from React Redux as well. And on this, we have access to this dispatch method, dispatch. Let me initialize this as well. And now, so we call use selector hook to take a look at what do we have within our Redux and what we want to get out of there. So for the purposes of this component, which is called boards list, and this page, my boards, I want to take a look at only one function. And the function's job is to create a board. Do I create cards in this page? No. Do I edit cards in this page? No. Do I take a look at the board details in this page? No. I do only one thing in this page, and that is I just create a board. So that's the only thing that I'm going to select from our store. So on the store, we have something that's going to be called a state, which is going to have a type of root state. We have not created the type. We are going to create that. Don't worry about it. And then what do we get from there? We get the state dot boards. So we have this object that's called boards, in which we have all of our boards. So you could have one board, you could have a million boards. All of them are there. From there, we're going to take a look at the items. So now this structure is a little bit alien to you for now, because we have not actually created the Redux part. And once we create it, this is going to make a lot of sense. So I'm going to say const boards right here, and I'm going to store that within this boards variable. Now, before moving forward, we need to handle the last part of this component. So far, I didn't show you where this createBoard comes. So this use selector, as I talked about, it takes a look at our store and it selects all of the boards for us. But we still need to have access to this createBoard. This comes from our store as well, but since we have not created that, we could import it now, but then later create it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to say import this method. We have not created that. We have not even created the file for it. So this is going to come from us, for us from a folder that is going to be called store. Store. And within that store folder, we're going to have something that's going to be called boards slice. And I'm going to come back to this, why this is called a slice in Redux. So now that we have imported our board, createBoard function from the store, we have also imported our boards from the store. Let's use this boards. So why do I want to use this? The reason for that is because I have this one board, which is hard-coded. I don't want it to be hard-coded. I want to take a look at however many boards I have, and then I want to show it. So if I have 10 boards, I want to show 10 boards. If I have one, I want to show one. If I have none, I don't want to show anything. And let me get rid of this comment as well. So I'm going to copy this name. And we still have this last thing. Remember here, I said there is going to be something that we can iterate over. So we show all of these boards in that manner. So let me just collapse this div. We want to show this div dynamically, depending on how many items there are. Now our board is going to be an object. All of our boards are going to be values or objects of an object. So we are not interested in the keys of that object. We are interested in the values of that object. But objects are not iterable. we cannot iterate over objects. So we need to convert it into an array. So we have this mother object with a capital O, and on there we have this values method. The values method is going to take a look at the values of an object. Let's pass that there. It may be a little bit confusing now, but once we create our types, it's going to get super crystal clear what it is that I'm talking about. So now that I've put my boards inside of the values method, it's going to ignore the keys. It's going to take a look at the values. The values are individual boards that we have, and it's going to convert it into an array. So as soon as I do the dot, you can see we have all of these array methods. And I'm going to select the map, and I'm going to iterate over each individual board. So that's why I'm going to call it a board. And once I iterate over each individual board, what do? Well, I generate this HTML. So let me cut that, put it right here. Now, since I am iterating over each individual board, the board title is going to come from board.title. There we go. That's going to be our board.title. Now, the number of cards is going to come from however many cards there are within that specific board. So this is going to be board.cards.length. Very good. If I hover on this, is of type unknown because we have not created the types. We are going to create the types for it. And then since we are iterating over this div, we are recreating this div several times. This should have a unique ID as well. And for this one, we're going to say key is going to be equal to board. Every board is going to have an ID. So board.id. What else do I need here? Now, the next thing that I need is whenever I click on this board, I should be able to navigate to that board's page. So I click on this div. So I could say after the key, give me an on click, and we want to run this whenever we click. So we want to navigate, remember? So we have already done that above using our React Router DOM library. And where do we want to go? We want to go to boards. Now, to that specific page for that specific board. And since I don't memorize that, we could just take a look at the ID, and it's going to be the same thing. So board.id is going to take us right there. So I think we're done here. Let's go ahead and let's create our types first. And after the types, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you how all of this is going to work. So in the source, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it types. And this could be types.ts, or I could call it index.ts. Since this is just one file, I could just call it index. Now, we have a board type. Let's create that as well first. I'm going to go with interfaces. That's my preferred way of doing objects anyway. So we have this board. For every individual board, how many kinds of information do we have? We have an ID, that is a sequence of alphanumeric characters, aka string. And then we have a title, which is going to be of type string as well. But then for every board, we have however many cards there are within that board. Now, since cards are like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's going to be a card array. And that's going to be a different type. So I'm going to go on the top in here. I'm going to create, I'm exporting these at the same time because we need to use them in different parts of our application. In here, we have the card type. Now for every card, we have a lot of information. So let's take a look at that. We have the IDs, so we can distinguish between different cards. We have the card title. As you can see there, this is going to be of type string. We have the card description, which is going to be of type string. We have the card status, which is going to be one of 3 types. So what I could do is I could use a union of literal types in TypeScript. This could be either a to-do or an in progress or it could be a done. And finally, we have this date when we created that card, and that is going to be of type string as well. So this is our card. We created the card, we created the board, but we didn't create that root state. Let's create that as well. Import, export interface, root state. So we have an object that's called boards, and within this boards, we're going to have all of our boards. But keep in mind, we have an item in here. Every board is going to be a child of an item. So we have this items key. Within the items key, we have I'm going to pass in a record type, because for every board, we need to have some sort of an ID, and then we have some sort of a content. So a record type is going to provide typing using TypeScript for key value pairs, key value pair data structures, and an object is an example of a key value pair. So the ID is going to be of type string, but then the actual board is going to be right here. And we need to add the loading state in case, now you could just remove this, not add it, but I'm going to come back to this when we get to our, in just a moment, we're going to create the Redux Store. And I'm going to explain to you why we need this loading, which is Boolean. This is used for API calls if we have any. And then we need to have our error as well, which could have a type of string or null. So we have created our types. I'm just going to keep them open right there. Root state. Let's import that from types. Very good. Now what I need to do is I need to create this boards slice. Let's create that as well. So in here, I'm going to right click, create a folder. This is going to be called store. And right click, new file, board slice.ts. Now keep in mind, this is not a component. This is pure JavaScript or TypeScript. This is just some functions doing some stuff. We are not trying to show any kind of HTML. That's why this is not a component. A component is something that displays HTML, displays JSX. It does some kind of calculations. It does something programmatically, but at the end of the day, it returns some JSX that we show in the browser. That's a component. This is not a component. This is just a regular TypeScript file that does some calculations for us, and it does it behind the scenes as well. That's why we put it inside of this store. And we call it the board slice. So let's hit enter and let's go ahead and let's see what we need. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to import two things in here. I'm going to say import, and I'm going to explain these in depth. Don't worry about it. We have on the Redux store, we have this create slice. And then we have something that's called payload. This is lowercase, payload action. These are available on Redux. So at Redux.js Toolkit. Very good. All I'm gonna find, or it's corresponding. Haven't we installed this? Why haven't we installed that? Redux Toolkit. I think we have not installed that. So let me just open up a new terminal right here. I'm going to say npm install at, I could just copy the name from here and it would install it for me. Just hit enter. It just installed that. I'm going to get rid of this terminal, lower that, and let's come right here. So we have this Redux Toolkit. The reason that we use Redux Toolkit is so we have access to these two methods. And we can see we no longer have that. It just says they're not used. We're going to use them. The create slice, this is actually a utility that is provided to us by the Redux Toolkit. And the idea behind this create slice is to simplify the process of writing the logic of Redux. And in the process, we create or we combine reducers, action, creators and the slice of state in one place. Now, the reason that it's called a slice is because whenever you're working with Redux, you're managing different parts of an application, and different parts are called different slices. So you break up your state into different parts. That's why they're called different slices. And in here, we use this create slice to create a slice of our state. It's just another synonym for a part. All right, so this create slice, it accepts, it needs some stuff from us. It is going to accept a name from us, and that's going to represent the name of the slice, and we are going to use it to generate the action types. It's going to expect the initial state, and that's going to be the initial state of our board. And it's also going to expect the reducers that we pass in. The reducers that we pass in here, they're going to be used to basically manage, calculate and manage the next state, so we can update our application accordingly. So let's go ahead and let's create these. Now, before creating the slice, I need to create its prerequisites here. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and create the initial state. It is going to be called initial state. Now, it is saying initial state, and we need to type annotate this as well, so we know exactly what this is. Now, what is this initial state? Well, the initial state depends on our board. It depends on our card. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say import, give me the board from types and give me the card from there as well. So in here, I will be creating a different type, and I could call it boards state. Let's create that, get rid of the space from there. So in here, I'm going to say interface. I could create this within the index.ts, but since I'm just using it here, I could just create it here. So boards state. And for this one, now what is every individual board's state? Now, we had the root state, which talked about the collection of the boards, but what about every individual board? Well, this is every individual board right here. So I could just copy that, put it right here. And we have the item, which is of type record. We have the string and the board in there. We have loading, which is of type Boolean, and then we have our error, which could be of type string or type null. The reason that we have the loading state is because we want to keep track of if an API call is in progress. But so far we don't have anything, but I'm still going to pass it since that's a good practice, so you know that it exists in there. We have our error state, and that is basically going to hold any error message from failed operations. So what is our initial state? So in the initial state, everything is going to be empty. So we have this items. This is going to be an empty object. We don't have any boards. We have the loading is set to false. Nothing is loading, and the error is going to be null. This is going to be our initial state. Now let's go ahead. Let's create a slice. We talked about what it accepts. So I'm going to say const boards slice. So we have this boards slice. We use our create slice, and this is going to accept an object. What is the slice's name? This is called boards. This is going to be the initial state. The initial state is the initial state that we created in there. And it is also going to accept reducers here to calculate the next state. So reducers are going to be functions, as you know from your knowledge of use reducer hook. So the first reducer that I'm going to create here is going to be create board. So what is the create board reducer going to do? Well, the create board reducer, when we called it, we passed in an object that had ID and title. So we need to accept it. Well, we have it right here within this action, but then I'm going to type annotate this action as well. If I come right here, we can see the ID. This has a type of string. but then this title, it has a type of string as well. So let's type annotate this, but they are available on this payload action that we imported from Redux Toolkit. So let's type annotate this. We have an ID that has a type of string, and then we have a title that has a type of string as well. So this is our payload, this is our action, but then this createBoard, since this is a reducer function, it generates the next state as well. So it is going to accept that as well. Now, after it accepts these two things, what it is going to do for us? Well, this is going to calculate the next state. That's very simple. But what is the next state specifically in this situation? Let's go back. The next state is when I say board, let's say next state. As soon as I hit enter, the next state is creating a new board and putting the title next state in there, and the number of cards should be 0. AKA the array of cards should be empty. So let me just paste that in there. I want these to be arrow functions because I want to make this short and sweet. So this could very well be an arrow function for us. Very good. So it is going to calculate the next state. So on the state, we have this items. And inside of the items, we're going to take a look at the ID for that specific board. Where is the ID? So the ID is on action.payload.id. And if I do the dot on payload, because this is coming from the user, the payload has all the information that the user has written. The payload has the ID that we created as developers and the title that the user has written inside of that input. Now, depending on which board it is, that's why we need to select the ID. We set the ID as the action.payload.id, so all IDs match. We set the title of this board to whatever the user has written. There we go. But initially, does it have any cards? As I said, this is going to be an empty array. So let's just pass in comma. What seems to be the problem here? Okay. Let's save this. Nothing. So card. Oh, this is, it says object literal may only specify known properties. Card does not exist in type writable draft board. Did you mean cards? Yes, I meant cards. Okay. Cards. Very good. So yeah, we called it cards. So we had an ID, a title, and then we had cards, which we set it to an empty array because initially we don't have any cards. Now there are going to be other reducers here as well. For example, we need to have some sort of a reducer to deleteBoard. We need to have some sort of reducer to createCard, updateCard, deleteCard. But for now, this is going to be enough for us. And we're going to keep it like this. So let's go ahead and let's export these so we can use them. Now, before exporting them, you need to understand what it is that we have actually created here. So we created a reducer, which is called boards slice. Now, this reducer, it has two different things. One of the things is the actions that it packs, like creating a board, deleting a board, and so on. So these are all reducer actions. But then the reducer also has the reducer function itself as well. And we need that reducer function in order to configure the store. So we need to come up with that configuration. But first of all, let's export the necessary stuff. So in here, I'm going to say export const. So far, what it is that I've created this createBoard. This is going to be one action for us. And let's specify it as an action. I'm going to say boards slice. And as soon as I do the dot, we have our actions, which is right there. And then we also have the reducer. So this is one action that I have just exported. And I'm going to export a reducer as well. Export default boards slice. As soon as I do the dot, here is the reducer. Let's export that as well. So as soon as I exported this create board, you can see here, it's already imported in our boards list, and it's actually working. So let's go ahead and let's create that configuration. Now, you could pass in the configuration here, but I want to put it in a separate file just in case. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to say, okay, index.ts. For good reason. This is going to be the configuration for our store. And in here, what I want to do is there is a function in Redux Toolkit that is called, let's see, that's called configure store that we import from Redux Toolkit that allows us to configure a store for us. So we have also exported the boards reducer. So let's import that here as well. I'm going to call it board reducer, and we import this from boards slice. Very good. Now, on this configure store, we have an object that accepts a reducer. Now, keep in mind, we exported the actions, and we use the actions inside of our components. The reason for that is because the components are involved with actions. What do I mean by that? With a component, you create a board, that's an action. You create a card, that's another action. You delete a board, that's another action, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the actual implementation of the store, you need these reducers in order to calculate the next state. So this is very important in the setup of this Redux that we're working with. So we have one store that is called boards, and it is equal to the boards reducer that I just imported. Now I'm going to store this within a variable, and I'm going to call it store. There we go. And now what we need to do is let's just save it, and let's go to our application, and we can see everything is just messed up. It doesn't matter how many times I click back to boards, it doesn't work. The reason for this is that we have exported this action. The action part is no problem. That's okay. The problem comes from the store that we've created. Now, if I were to open up our app.tsx file, let's take a look at this. So in here, we have this router provider, and this router provider handles the routing of our application. But the way that this store works is it has to wrap the entire application as well. And then it is going to work. So on the top, what we can do is we could first import the store. So I'm going to say import store. And where do we import it from? We import it from the store. Now you just need to point it to the folder because this folder has an index.ts. And this file's job is just to import the configured store for us. And that's going to be enough. And now we use that store in order to wrap it with our wrap it around our entire application. So we have this provider, and this is going to have a closing tag as well. I'm going to pass in this our routing inside of there, but this provider, it accepts an attribute. It accepts a prop or a property, and we could call it store, and I'm going to set it equal to the store that we have imported. And as soon as I did that, you can see we got our boards back because it has to wrap our entire application. And if I go up, this provider, we imported that from React Redux as well. So we have one router provider. You can see these names, they are very similar because they do almost the same thing. What they do is they provide some functionality. Of course, one is routing, another one is state management, but the way they do it is in a similar fashion. So they provide some functionality, but the way they provide it is by wrapping the entire application. That's why it's called provider. So here we are done. Now we should only have one functionality, and that should be creating a board. So I could say new board, and let's hit enter. And as soon as I hit enter, it has created the board. But then the functionality for us is when you create a new board, you're redirected to that specific boards page. So if I say new board, just add a I could add just a couple of hyphens. And as soon as I create, you can see we are redirected to that boards page. And here it's the same thing. But the cool thing is now we have this universally unique ID that has been generated. And we use the same ID for the routing as well as the ID of that specific board. So if I go back, and there we go. We got our new board. It has its styles and everything is looking fine. So next up, let's take a look at our board slice. So the way that I'm going to go about this is we need to close this. We don't need it anymore. Let's close that. We are not going to need this index for our store. Let's close that. I'm going to keep this open. I'm going to keep our store slice open. Now I'm going to start creating the next page. So the next page is we have created this boards list. The next one is if I click on any specific board, I need to see some information for that board. So I want to create all of this. Let's go to the board details and let's get started with creating that. And for this one, we could go the same way that we went for our other JSX. And you know what, for now, let's just leave it at that. So I have created a couple of things. I have my createBoard, but in here, I'm basically concerned with the board that I have created. So I need to import that first, and that's what I'm going to do here. So where is that? Now, remember, we had a use selector hook from React Redux. The job of this was to help us access different part of our store. If we want to retrieve a specific board based on its ID, we could use this use selector. This is going to accept a state. The state is going to have a type of root state. Where do we import that from? Root state. Well, we import it from types, so it's here. And then what do we want to do here? Let me just go forward with this. So if the board exists, I want to retrieve that, but I am looking at the board ID. If the board ID exists, then I'm going to select my state, and on the state, I have these boards, and on the boards, I have the items. You can see, because you're type annotating everything with TypeScript, it's just everything is available there. So if the board ID exists, then we are going to show that board. Otherwise, we are going to return null. But how do I know let's just store this first, and then I'm going to talk about that. So I'm going to store this in a variable, and I'm going to call it board. Now, how do I know? Since I don't memorize the board ID, how do I know what the board ID is? Well, we have another hook in React Router. React Router is very handy, and it is called use params. So whenever you're using dynamic URLs or you're using URL parameters, now this dynamic URL, you could extract one portion of that, and you could call it a URL parameter. You have this hook, use params, in React Router, and this is going to give you access to a portion of that specific URL. And which portion do you want to access? You want to access the dynamic portion. And this use params is going to give you access to that. And we're going to store it in a variable, and we're going to call it board ID. Well, we destructure it immediately. That's why it has that object syntax. And now you know where this board ID is coming from. So it is coming from this use params. Use params gives us access to the URL parameters, and it even gives you an example here. So assuming a route pattern like this, so let me show it to you. So we do have a route pattern like this. Instead of this, we have that board ID. And then if the board ID is 123, params.post ID is going to be 123. But since we are destructuring it, we don't need to have this params. We immediately get the member, which is post ID. In this scenario, we call it the board ID, but you could call it the post ID if that's the same thing that you have called it when you created your routes. But in here, you can see I called it board ID. So I need to stick to that here as well. So now if the board exists, we get it. Otherwise we return null. Now we need to show that inside of here as well. So inside of our JSX. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if board doesn't exist for some reason, I am going to display some JSX. If the board exists, I'm going to display a different JSX. You could do this as well. So if the board doesn't exist, I'm going to display a section element. This is, we do not import it from Lucid React. So this is going to be a section element emit abbreviation. And in here, you could come up with any kind of HTML you want. I'm just going to say board not found. And then I need to give the user some ability to redirect to some other page. I could say back to boards. Now, there are going to be some styles applied on these. And yeah, we need to have something here. And for this one, I'm going to have another section element. Within the section element, I could just say board. Save that so we can see that. Now, since the board exists, we can only see this thing. This will only be shown if the board doesn't exist. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to apply the styles and then I'm going to come back. All right, the styles have been applied. Now, what I want to do here is I want to give the users an ability to redirect to some other page. So for this one, we need to have our on-click. We have already talked about this extensively. And I'm going to call this navigate function. And where do I want the users to be navigated to? So I want the users to go to the boards. Just go there. And now let's import this navigate. So I'm going to go on top, const. What was it was use navigate function. This is a hook. Well, hooks are functions anyway. So this is going to give us access to this navigate. Let's store it. There we go. So now that that works, let's talk about this board. What do we want to put in there? So the way that I'm going to go about this HTML is going to be very simple. We have this part, this top part, and you can see the spacing of the top part. The spacing with the bottom part, it means the top part is inside one container and the bottom part is inside another container. Another giveaway for this one is the spacing between these two columns, these two rows actually. So you can see the spacing here is smaller than the spacing here. That also means that these are within one container and these are within another container. And that's exactly how I'm going to go about this. And this is one of the ways you can actually retrace your steps. So here we have a div. Within the div, now these divs, again, the aim of these is to provide better layouting options. And that's it. That's the only thing they do. So within this div, I'm going to have a button. The button is going to have an arrow left. And let's close that as well. Class name. The size of this is, you know what? I'm not going to apply classes. I'm just going to apply them later. So this button, let's just come right here. And this is this one. So if I click on this, I need to go back. So if I'm going somewhere, that means this button needs an on-click event handler. And for that, we do the same thing. We get our navigate function. And where do we want to go? So I am on the specific board details page. If I go back, where do I go? I go to the boards page where I see all of the boards. All right, so this is that button. Let's come down. After that, I'm going to pass in the title of the card inside of an H1. And in here, I could say simply board dot title. And let's see why it doesn't work. What is it? Board is not set to type React Node. Board dot title. So we do have this board. that we declared here. Board doesn't exist. It's the same thing, yeah? There is no typo. Board. I think problem is, so we have the state. On the state we have the boards. On the boards we have the items. But the items, it contains all of the boards. We want that specific board. So I'm going to pass in the board ID here as well. And now if I come down here, if I do board again, dot, and there we go. So we got the board title. There we go. And as soon as I save that, and this is what I was working on. So we have this board not found. Go back to the boards. The reason that it says that is because we're not persisting any of the changes to local storage or anywhere else. So as soon as you refresh the page or make some big changes like this, the page refreshes and it loses that board. And when it loses that board, it doesn't know what you're talking about. And it says board not found. That's why I added that. So in here, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, hit enter. There we go. Here is the title. So now that the title is done, let's move forward. I'm going to get out of this div. I'm going to create another div. Again, this is just for layouting purposes. There is no other idea behind these divs. And this is going to be addCard. Save this. There we go. You can see we have our addCard. Let me click there. And after that, we have another button. That's going to be deleteCard. Very good. Let's add some icons for these ones. For this one, we are going to have a plus, which we import from Lucid React. For this one, we are going to have a trash icon. Trash 2. And let's save that. There we go. You can see it's taking shape. So now that all of this is done, let's move out of this first big div. So I'm going to collapse that. Now, what else do we need here? Well, if I click on this addCard, we have this form. And we have already created something like this before. So this form is going to be rendered conditionally. Why? Because when I move to this page, like if I come to this page originally, it doesn't exist. As soon as I click on this addCard, it exists. So it should be shown conditionally. And there should be some sort of a state that is going to handle that for us. But for now, let's create the form, and then we're going to come up with the state hooks as well. Within this form, we're going to have an input with a type of text. The placeholder is going to say card title. Now, this form is going to create different cards for us. And after that, there's going to be 2 buttons. So a div, 1 button that is going to have a type of button, and this is going to say cancel. We've already done this. Another one is going to say add, and the type of this is going to be submit, because we want this form to be accessible. So on the form, we're going to add some sort of a handling adding card functionality, and then the rest is going to come right here. So we have this form. Let's take a look at it. There we go. This is how our form looks like. This is how native forms in Tailwind look like. And finally, we need to show the 3 columns that we have. So 1, 2, 3 columns. And within each column, if I were to create a card, so let's come right here, we need to show those as well, those cards. And they have different styling options. So all of that, I need to consider it here. So for all of them, I'm going to add in a div, and then I'm going to come up with the creation of the columns. Now, the way that I'm going to go with the creation of the columns is going to be a rather simple way. And for that, I'm going to create an array. Let's call it columns. Here is our array. Each array is going to, this array is going to have 3 children. And each of these children is going to be 1 column. So for each column, I'm going to pass it an ID. And then the column is going to have a title as well. Let's copy paste it a couple of more times. The second one is going to be in progress. Let me just copy this, put it right here. So I capital, P capital, and a space there. And the third one is going to be done. There we go. So now that I have these, I need to add a couple of commas here as well. What I can do is I can iterate over these and I can show the content in each iteration. So if I want to iterate, it means I want to do something JavaScripty. So I need to open up curly braces. And here, let's grab columns. And as soon as I do the dot, since that's an array, we have all the array methods. And each time I am selecting one individual column and I'm trying to generate some HTML. So since there were 3 columns, I will be generating the following HTML 3 times. Let's add a key. The key is going to be column.id. Now, what do we want to do within this div? Now, keep in mind that these are going to be the individual cards. And if I hover on them, you can see we have this hover draggable state. And then we should be able to click on them and be able to move them to some other columns. So this is the part where it makes it like a Kanban board, where we have this ability to do this. So for now, let's just complete the HTML and then we're going to talk about that feature as well. For the H2, I could say column.title. And after that, this is going to be like the individual column. And within this div, we're going to have our individual cards. So all the cards are going to be stored within our board. And I'm going to do dot. You can see we have the cards. And now which cards do we want to show in each of these columns? Well, it depends on the card's ID. So we need to take a look at what the card status is. And we need to cross-reference that with the column ID. If that's the same, we want to show that in that specific column. So in here, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a filter. And each time I'm filtering one individual card, and I'm going to grab the card dot status, and I'm going to say, okay, as long as that's equal to column.id. If that's the same thing, then I'm going to grab my map method and I'm going to map over those cards. And in each iteration, what do I want to do? So I'm going to generate some HTML. All right, I hope you're not getting confused. So in here, we're going to create a div element. Let's save this. Now you can see everything is getting ordered. So this div is going to be that individual card. The div above it, that's going to be the container for the cards because we want it to be responsive. So for this one, let's add this key as a prop. So key is going to be card.id. There we go. For every individual card, we need to have the title. You could add more information. You could add the card description, which in my idea is not a good thing because the description could be long. You don't need it here. So that's why I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the title as well as the date that this card was created. So there's going to be an H3 and then there's going to be a paragraph. H3 is going to be card.title, and then the paragraph is going to be we're going to grab our new data object. We're going to pass in the card.createDat, and then we're going to convert it to locale date string. Let's open up curly braces, and that should be done here. And now let's take a look at our changes. There we go. We have all the 3 columns. We don't have any card. That's why we don't see that. So we need to add all of the CSS styles, aka Tailwind classes, and then we're going to come up with the functionality for this one. So I'm just going to pause the video and I'm going to implement all of those and I'm going to come back. All right, all the styles are applied. Well, not all of them. There are a few styles left, but then I need to show you those styles, how we apply them. They're going to be applied conditionally, so some conditional styles. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to implement this functionality to be able to add a card. And we know that that functionality comes from this form element. So the first thing, we shouldn't be able to see this form right at the beginning. So I need to show this conditionally. So since I'm doing something UI related and conditional, I need to have some use state. So I could say, I could create a state variable. This is something we have already done. And I could call it is adding card. So if I am adding card, then I want to show this form. Otherwise, I do not want to show it. So let's cut it, put it right there and save it. And now we need to create this adding card. Is adding card. But we are, you know what? Let's just go up and let's create it. So I'm going to come down here. And for this one, we have our use state. We know why we use it, because we want to use state, because we want to come up with some way to show something conditionally. And when we say we show it, it means we want to change the UI. So the simplest way to change the UI is to use the use state. But what is going to be the initial state for this one? We know that the state variable is going to be Boolean, because if it is true or false, that means it's Boolean. The initial state for this one is going to be false. But use state, what it gives us is a state variable and a setter method to set that state variable. Set is adding card. Initialize that as well. And let's save this, and there we go. We can see already that this part is done. So we don't see the form immediately when we jump into this page. We need to click this add to card, and then we should be able to see that form. And let's implement that functionality as well. And let's move down. Where is that button? So here is, it says add card. So in here, what I could do is I could say on click, and what do we want to do? So whenever I click the button, that's why I'm putting a function inside of curly braces. If you don't, it's going to run as the component renders. It's going to run immediately. But I want this to be executed, this function, whenever I am clicking on this button. So when I'm clicking on this button, I'm selecting the state setter function, the function that's responsible for changing the value of the state variable called is adding card. And I wanted to change it to true because it's Boolean. It could either be true or false. So now if I click on this add card, you can see we see the form. But this cancel, it doesn't cancel it. So let's implement that cancel as well. And for the cancel, let me just click here. For this one, we are going to have, now these buttons, all of them are going to have this on click because we click on a button. That's why it's always going to be on click. And when I click on this, I'm going to say set is adding card. I'm going to set it to its initial state, which is false. So if I click on cancel, the form is gone. If I click on add card, it's shown. If I click on cancel, it's gone. So we're changing the state, we're changing the UI. And for that, we use useState. So now that the first one is done, let's talk about this input. You have already talked about this form, so I'm going to try to move a little bit quickly. We have an onChange. So for every HTML element, you have a different kind of. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. I should say that for every action, you have a different listener. So if you want to listen for keys that are being typed inside an input, you listen using this onChange. And you take a look at the event object. The event object is going to give you the information regarding that input, what has been typed in there. And if you want to take a look at the information, you're going to say e.target. That's going to be the target. And on the target, you have this value property. And then we send this to React. So we need to have another state setter function because this is constantly changing. Now you might be having this question, how do I know that this should be a state variable or a state setter function? Now, because this is constantly changing, it should be, and you want React to keep track of it, you should set it as the state setter function. But if you just want to read the value, then that's going to be a state variable. So that's why here I'm going to create a new state setter function. I'm going to call it set new card title. This is going to be the card title, right? And then this new card title is going to come back from React as the value, new card title. And that's going to be the thing that we just read from. So it's a new card title. Now let's go above and let's create the state as well. Use state. Now, what is the title initially? It's a string, but initially it's going to be 0. It's going to be an empty string, not 0, but an empty string. So we have new card title, and then we have set new card title const, and there we go. So this part is done. This is going to set the title for our new card. Now, what about submitting this title? Now that we have given to React, we need to send it to our store. So this button has a type of submit. That means if I just do an on submit on the form, the button is going to handle that for me. And I'm going to say handle addCard. Much like what we did with board, we said handle addBoard, and in here we can say function handle addCard. What is this going to accept? It's not going to accept anything, but it's going to add a card for us. Now this is going to look a lot similar to the way we added a board, so I'm just going to move forward with this. The only way that we add a title is to make sure that it exists, and we trim it. Every time we call this form, we call this submit button on the form, we are going to create a new card. So const new card. The type of this is going to be card, which I just imported from types. And what is going to be the information involving this? We're going to have an ID, which is going to come from crypto.random UUID. Each card is going to have a title, which is going to be equal to the state variable, new card title. We're going to have a description. Now, the description, we want to set it to an empty string because we don't show it here, but we still need this description to go to our Redux Store, because once we click on that card, then we want to show the description. But in this page, it's going to be an empty string. The status, whenever we create a new card, the original or the initial status of that is going to be equal to do. And then we have this created at, where we have this new data object, and we select when it was created. So to ISO, we could say to ISO string. All right, so now that we have created the card, we need to dispatch it. We need to send it to our store, to our Redux. So I'm going to grab my dispatch method, dispatch. Let me just copy the name. Now this dispatch is available on use dispatch that is given to us by Redux. So if I go up, we have use dispatch right there. See? Imported from Redux. And then this is going to give us access to this method, to this function dispatch. And the reason that's called dispatch is because we're sending this information, we're dispatching it from this component to our Redux store. Why? Because that's where we have the entire state management of our app. That's one reason. The second reason is so after that, we can use that information in any part of our application without duplicating. Without duplication, we can just use it. Now in here, when I'm creating a card, of course, I need to have the reducer for it or the action for it, which is addCard. And for every card, we are going to have the board ID to add it to that specific board. And the card is going to be new card. Very good. We're yet to create the addCard. We are going to create it. Now, once we click on submit on this form, we want to set the title back to 0. So I'm going to say set new card title. Not again, I'm saying 0. It's an empty string. And then we're going to get rid of the form as well. Set is adding card. Let's set it to false. So we get rid of the form as well. Now we need this addCard. We need to import it from our boards slice. We need to create it first in order for us to import it. So let's go ahead. Let's do this because unless we have this, we're not going to be able to actually move forward with this section. Because I should be able to add a card and then the draggable parts are going to come into the picture. So we have this reducer, right? We have this createBoard and the reducer is here. So the createBoard ends right here. And after that, I'm going to say addCard, this method. Now, what is this method going to accept? This is going to have the state in order to calculate the next one, and we're going to have an action that is going to have the type of payload action, and then we are going to pass in the board ID, which is going to be of type string, as well as the card, which is going to be of type card. Payload state. What am I missing here? So after this, let's have our fat arrow and let's just move forward. Very good. So we have addCard. How do we want to add a card? Well, we need to select our board. So we have state.items and we need to grab that specific board based on the board ID that was sent from that specific component. Now keep in mind, when we are in every individual board's page, we already know what the board ID is. We just need to get it. And all the information is on this action. So on the action payload dot, we have this board ID. This is going to give us the current board to which we want to add our card const board. And once we get this board, we are going to say board dot. Well, the dot doesn't work. It should work. So let me see what this problem is. This type string cannot be used as an index type. Oh, it's a capital S. It should be lowercase s. So on the board, we have these cards and we know the cards is an array. So we can just push some new card into it. And what do we want to push? Well, we are going to push the payload.card. And what is this card? The card is the new object that we created within the component itself. We sent it here and now we just push it to here. All right, so we need to add card here. And coming to this file, we can just import this, which I just did. So we have this addCard action. We imported this from our board slice. We seem to have a string undefined is not a type string. Let's do the check. Let's say if board ID exists, then we want to do that. So if I say back to boards, let's create 456. Here we have our board. So if I do 1, 2, 3 and add, that is going to add a card for me. And there we go. Before moving forward and implementing the dragging functionality, I want to implement the deleting board functionality as well. So for now, if I just click on this, nothing happens. And let's select this button. And on that button, we're going to implement an on click. So where is that? There we go. So here we have this button. And for this button, I'm going to say on click, and this is going to run a function that is going to be handled deleteBoard. Now we still need a reducer for this one as well. Oh, well, I shouldn't have saved it. So I saved it and then we have a 404. Okay, so beneath this function, beneath this handle addCard, I'm going to come down. I'm going to say function handle deleteBoard. Now, when I'm trying to delete a board, I don't need to check the ID here. So I don't have to pass it because I'm already on that board's page. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask the user if they're sure that they want to delete the board. So I'm going to say if window.confirm, and then I'm going to say, are you sure you want to delete this board? And then if the user says, yes, I am sure I want to delete it, I'm going to send a dispatch to our Redux Store. And within the dispatch, we are going to pass in, we need to, create this action. So I could call this a deleteBoard action. And then since this is going to my store, as I said, within this function, I don't need to add an ID as a parameter. I don't need to pass an ID as a parameter. But once it goes to our store, there is going to be other boards as well. Then we need to distinguish between which board it is that we want to delete. And here I'm going to pass in our board ID. And we could also navigate the user, since this page is not going to exist, we could navigate the users to the boards page. Now, I saved it, everything came back, but still this is not going to work. So we need to create this deleteBoard. I just copied that name and I'm going to come right here. So here, this ends right here. And right after that, I'm going to say deleteBoard. So what is this function going to do for me? The job of this is just to select our state and our action, our payload, and then just delete that for us. And so much like before, we're going to select our state, we're going to select our action, and on the action we have this payload type, payload action. And the type of this is going to be very simple. The type of this is going to be just a simple string. Now, what do we want this action to do for us? Well, we are going to grab our state. On the state, we have items. Now, we want to select that specific board, which we sent the ID, right? So I'm going to say action.payload. Now, I'm not going any step further. Like I'm not deleting a specific card. I am not deleting like one part of the board. I'm just passing action.payload, and this means that I want to delete the entire thing. And how do I delete it? I just pass in this delete keyword, which is going to remove a property from an object. And our board is basically a property in the board's object. All right, so we have this deleteBoard. Now let's make sure that this is also, you know what? Let me put it before the addCard. We need to make sure that this is exported. I just saved it again. Well, I should have saved it. So I'm going to come right here. I'm going to import this. And now it says type string. Let me pass in the exclamation mark. Okay, very good. Now let's go back to boards. Let's create a specific board. And it could have a card. Let's say 1, 2, 3. And if I say delete board, we see this message. Are you sure you want to delete this board? And now you could hit enter, or you could click, and that's going to delete it. And not only it will delete it, but it will navigate the user back to the boards page as well. Now we're done with most of the functionality that we wanted to implement, but the functionality that is the dragging and the dropping part that is remaining. So we are going to get started for that. Now, since when we are working with the drag and drop, we are going to make some changes to our UI, we need to have some sort of a state method or a state function as well. And to get started with the implementation of the dragging functionality, we need to first take a look at what we have here. So I have created a new board and there is just one card in there. Now, if I hover on this card, you can see we have this. We have another pointer, and this means that we can select this and we can put it anywhere we want. But if we go outside of the boundaries of where we have clearly specified, like these 3 statuses or stati, this is going to basically change for us that cursor. It means this part is not allowed. Here it's not allowed, but it is allowed here. So when I'm selecting this, and I'm trying to decide where I want to put this card, you can see the styles for where I picked up the card are changed. It's a little bit faded out. You can see the card that I'm holding on, it has a little bit of transparency. So that has some styling as well. But all of these styles, they're conditional. They're based on whether or not that draggable state is on or it's off. And then you can see the actual holders, like the card holders, these statuses, they also change their style. So there is just a lot of stuff that we need to cover in order to implement this rather simple functionality. So let's just get to it. The first thing that I'm going to do is I need to collapse some stuff. So I'm going to collapse this. I'm going to collapse is addCard. Let's collapse this one as well. I want this navigation to be a little bit smoother. So for this one, I'm going to zoom out a little bit because there's just a little bit more to cover. So here what we did was here is everything that is involving these three statuses. We have the to-do, we have the in progress, and then we have the done. Here we mapped over the three columns. We added the column title, and then we added the cards inside of there. So within this board.cards.filter.map, this div actually, this div right here, this is one individual card. Okay, the reason that I'm pointing this out is because it is very, very important for you to really know that this is one individual card. And that because we're mapping over the boards, cards, and then we basically show them on the in the browser. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with the state for this because that's very important, of course. Now, we are going to use state. It's very simple, and we just need to change something on the UI. Now, initially, when you're working with useState, the initial state is extremely important. What is the initial state? Well, the initial state is something that I don't know. I don't know whether that's a string. I don't know whether that's a number. I have no idea what that is. So I'm just going to pass in a null here. But at some point in time, this initial state is going to change. It's going to change with the card that I pass. Maybe I should zoom in so it's more visible. So that's why I'm going to pass in a union of two different types. So we have this null type, which is the initial state, because I don't know initially what this is. Until I select it and start like dragging it over, then I know what that is. Then I know, okay, oh, I selected a card. But initially, I don't know what I'm doing here. So let's just put it there. Now, that's our initial state, but once I select the card, the state is going to be the card itself. Now, when it comes to what the useState produces, the naming, again, it is extremely flexible, but make sure it is something that makes sense. Now, since we're dragging a card, I'm just going to say dragged card. And then we need to set that setter function for it, dragged card. Let's uppercase that and initialize this as well. Okay, so we have this set dragged card. Now, with this null is going to be the null that I specified here. That's the initial value of this state variable, which is dragged card. And then we use this set dragged card to calculate the next value for this specific state variable. That's how these two things are tied. One is a variable, the other one is a function that determines the next value for that variable. Now, let's come down here. Where is our card? Well, I pointed that out, that here is this part. This is our card. Now, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the opening tag of this div right here. And there is this Boolean that we have that is called draggable. And this is going to allow us to make this card have the functionality to be dragged. Now, I am going to specify an event here, and that is called onDragStart. onDragStart. And the job of this event is to basically call a function that is going to implement the dragging functionality. But the event that you want to start the dragging, it means you're selecting it, that's the dragging start, and you're moving it, and once you drop it, that's the drag drop. All right? And I'm going to explain all of them one by one. So this function is going to implement, this event handler is going to implement something that's called handle drag start. And I'm going to go up and I'm going to create this. So let's go up. I could collapse these two functions as well. We don't need them anymore. Let's collapse this one as well. So in here, I'm going to say function handle drag start. Now, whenever we are handling this dragging functionality, we need to pass in which card it is that we have selected. So I need to come back down here and I need to pass in the specific card that we have selected. And how do we know which card it is that we have selected? Well, we are already iterating over that card, so I can just pass it right here. Let's go up. Let's pass in the card here, but the card is going to have, card is going to have a type of card. All right. Now, what is the job of this? Well, the job of this is to trigger that state function for us, that state hook for us. So we have this set dragged card, and the value of this, the way that this function works is it's going to accept one of the two types. It's going to either accept a null type or a card type. Now, initially it's null, but when we say handle drag start, it means now it's not null anymore. It is going to change the value of the state variable from null to card right there. Now that we have started the dragging, we need to allow the dragging to drop as well. So for that, I'm going to come right here and I'm going to explain this. So we said that this div is our card, but where do we want to put the card? We want to put it in its container. So the container could be a to-do, in progress, or done. But what is the container in JSX? It's this div. It's this div right here. So this div is the container for all of the cards. But depending on where we want to drop the card, we need to specify, we need to check the card against the ID of that specific column that we want to put it in. So I cannot just say, okay, I am only going to implement the functionality for the in progress. So we can only drop in the in progress column, but we cannot extract, we cannot like drop it from there off. Well, that didn't sound well. So what I mean is we should be able to implement, we should implement the dragging and dropping functionality for all three columns. If I just implement it for the to do, that means I can select a card and move it off the to-do to in progress or to the done. But I can never come back to the to-do. That's not what I want. I want all three columns to have the same functionality. So if you want something to be repeated several times, you should not hard code it. You should make it dynamic. So it changes depending on where it is being used. So on this div, I'm going to call another method, another event listener actually, and that is on drag over. And the job of this is to basically run a function for me that I am going to call handle drag over. And let's save this. Let's just copy the name. Let's go up. I'm going to come right down here. Now I'm going to say function handle drag over. Now again, I'm not specifying which column it is that I want to put it in, put the card in, or to drop the card. I just want to allow each card to allow this dropping functionality. Okay, so the to-do has to be able to accept a card, in progress has to be able to accept a card, and done has to be able to accept a card. And the only thing that I need to do here is going to be to prevent the default behavior. So I'm going to say e.prevent. We could just determine the type. First E, it is React, React.drag, drag event. And then here I'm going to say e.prevent default, and let's just save it. And you might be asking, okay, is that it? That's the only thing that we want to do? Well, what is this prevent default? I'm sure you're already familiar with this. This is the reason for this is because by default, browsers, they disable dropping. That's the default behavior of a browser. Now, when we say prevent default, we are preventing this default behavior, aka we are allowing the dropping functionality. We are allowing the drop, not the dropping functionality. The dropping functionality comes from somewhere else. This is just that we allow the drop. So I could just name these functions, start the drag. I could name this allow to drop, and then I could say drag drop functionality. So there is going to be one other function that's going to be the dragging and dropping functionality. But this is just, we first need to start it, and then we need to allow it to end as well. And then we're going to implement the dragging and dropping functionality. So for that, let's come here and let's specify where we want to implement that function. Well, as I said, when we select a card, we don't want to specifically tell it to go to a specific column. It should be able to go to any of the 3 columns. And so on this div, I have another event listener that is called onDrop. So this onDrop is going to handle the functionality when we drop the card. So I'm going to say handle drop, but then we need to specify which column it is. So I need to select the column.id, but I'm going to cast its type as the status of the card. So I'm going to say as card status. There we go. And the reason that I did this is because we need to drop this in a valid column, and we need to make sure that whenever we drag it to any of the columns, we need to be able to distinguish between these columns as well. And that's why we select the ID of the column and we say, okay, if it is any of the stati or statuses of the card, then that's okay. But aside from the status of the card, which is to do, in progress, and done, you're not allowed to drop it anywhere else, right? So let's save this, handle drop. Let's just copy this. Now, what is this function? What is it going to do? We're going to implement that momentarily right here. So I'm going to say function. Let's just paste the name in there. So we passed in a card. So we basically passed in the status of the card. So in here, I'm going to say status. The type of this is going to be card status. And let's uppercase this. Whoops. What am I doing? So I'm going to say card status. Very good. Here. So what do we do within this function? We need to implement a few checks. So we need to have some sort of a conditional. We need to check if the card is being dragged. So how do we check that? Well, we have a state variable for it that is called dragged card. Now, if this dragged card value is null, that means we're not dragging any card. But if it is anything aside from null, that means we're dragging the card. So if it is true, it means we're dragging this card. And then we need to make sure that a valid board ID exists as well. So I'm going to do board ID. And then the last thing that I want to do here is when I select a card and I want to drag it over to another column, I need to make sure that the column that I'm dragging it over to is different from the original column that the card existed. All right. So if I'm selecting the card from to do, I need to make sure that when I'm dragging it over, it should be a different column than to do. So it should either be progress or it should be done. So the status of the card should be different. So I'm going to say status of the card is not equal to the dragged card dot status. Now, if this happens, what do we want to do? So if all of this is set to true, we're going to update our card. So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it updated card. The type of this is going to be equal to card. But then what do we want to update when it comes to this card? Well, do you want to update the name of the card, or do you want to update the description or the date that it was created? We don't want to do anything else. So we basically spread all the previous properties of the card and we just change the status of the card. See, it's extremely simple. So we keep the name, we keep the description, we keep when the card was created, and the only thing that we change is the status of that card. So the status is right here. So we keep the title, we keep the description as it was, we keep the created date. The only thing that we change is the status when we are like dragging and dropping that. And then once I change that, shouldn't I make sure that I send that change to my store? So I need to have some sort of a method that is going to update the state or the status of this card. And for that, we're going to have this update card action that we're going to create. So For that, we are going to need our board ID, and I'm going to pass in the updated card here as well. And after the card has been dragged, when the dragging starts, and then we allow the drop, and then we handle the drag drop functionality, what happens at the end? Well, at the end, we revert back to our original state. So this is, let me just put it here. So I selected that, I moved it, this is dragging start. If I put it here, that's dragging over, and it basically means that we're allowed to put the card here. But once I put it there, isn't the state back to null? So I need to set that back to null as well. It means we're not dragging any card and we're not doing anything. So let's copy this line, and we need to go back to our store, and we need to create that reducer here as well. So right after this, we have the update card. Now, again, we are going to have our state here. Much like before, we have our action that has a type of payload action. And for this one, what did we send as a payload? We sent the board ID. So the board ID, board ID. Let me just fix this, put it on the same line. We send the board ID, okay, and we said that the type of this is string. What else did we send? We also sent the specific card. So we need to accept it here as well. We send the card, and we said, okay, the type of that is card. Have I typed that correctly? Payload action, very good. And now, what do we want to do here? We just update the board. So I'm going to say const board. It's very simple. It's much like what we did in the adding card. So we did here, we said, okay, we update the board with the payload that we got. We have the same kind of thing here as well. So I could even just copy paste this, because at the end of the day, we're updating the board. Now that we have selected our board, let's check if this board exists. This is a simple check. Now, what I want to do is I want to find out the index of the card that I want to move, and then I want to pass it to that board. I want to update the board with that card. So here I'm going to say, let's first find the index, and I'm going to store it within, come on, buddy, within this index variable. And let's grab our board. On the board, we have cards. Since cards is an array, we can say find index, and we want to find the index of a card. And how do we find it? If the card.id is equal to the ID of the card that the user has sent us with the action payload. So we're going to say action.payload.card.id. If both of these are the same, let me just save this. If both of these are the same, it means we have selected our correct card. And now that I've found the card, I'm going to replace it with the found card. So what this actually means is since we have already created the card is already in the board. But let me just explain this easier. So here is the card. The card has a status of to do. I created this card. The card is already in the board. Now, I move it from to do to in progress. The card is still the same card. The status has been updated. So the only thing that I do is I find this card inside of the board again, and I update that with the previous state of that card. I just update it. And what do I update? I just update the state. So for that, what we can do is we can say, okay, action.payload.card. This is going to be the new card for us. And here we have cards, and let's pass in the index. And that's it. That's the only thing that we need to do here. And if I feel like I need to go over this one more time. So what we do here is, this is the card that we changed the status for. All right. And then we found it inside of the board as well. Here is the board. But keep in mind, this index, this variable, it holds a card that the status of which is going to be an old status. But this action.payload.card, this holds a card for which the status is new. So we switch these two statuses. We switch the cards, even though the cards are the same, in order to update that status, in order to renew that status, and that's it. So index is going to find the old card for us, and once we find it, we just replace it with the new one. And what is the difference? The difference is just the status, nothing else. And now that we have created this update card, let's export it as well. So I'm just going to pass it right there, and we should be able to import it from here. There we go. Let's save this. So hopefully everything should be working properly. Some styles are going to be missing because we did not apply these styles. And aside from that, it should work. So you can see I am able to start the drag. I cannot drop it here because we just allowed the drop to be within these columns. So I could drop it there, very good, and I could drop it. I could drop it here, very good, very good. Now let's implement the styles so it's more visible. We need to apply the styles for this div first. So for this one, I'm going to say class name. Since the styles are going to be conditional, we need to open up curly braces and we need to have our backticks. Now I'm going to be copy pasting these styles. I'm not going to type them, but I'm going to explain these. So these are the styles that I'm going to apply no matter what the state is. So if it is draggable, it's not draggable, I don't care. I'm just going to apply these styles. So you can see already it looks better. But then if we are within the dragged state, let me grab my template literal. That's why it didn't work. So if I am within the state, then I'm going to do something. But if I'm outside of the state, I'm just going to pass in an empty string. That means I don't want to apply any classes. So if the card is being dragged, I want to implement these classes. Let's save that. And now let's select this. You can see. Now, why isn't the card itself being applied any styles? That's because we just applied the styles on the parent, which is one of these columns, any one of these columns. Now that this part is done, let's go ahead and let's implement styles for that individual card as well. Here we have the card right after on drag start. I'm just going to say class name. And in here, we are going to basically do the same thing. I'm going to say backticks. So some styles are going to be unique. There is going to be this style cursor move that I'm going to apply. That doesn't matter what the state of this is. But then aside from that, let's just change the opacity. So the only thing that we do is we change the opacity. So for this one, I'm going to say if dragged card dot ID is equal to the card ID. The reason that I'm doing this check is because I don't want to change the opacity of all of the cards. I just want to change the opacity of the card that is being dragged. Only that one. The rest of them, I don't care. And if it is not the same thing, we just add this empty string. Dragged card is possibly null. Yeah, it could be null. So I could just add this. Very good. Let's save everything. Okay, it says back to boards. Let me take a look at the inspect. What is the problem here? Cannot read properties of null. Reading ID, line 156. It is talking about this. So I'm going to change this exclamation mark with the question, which is the optional one. So now if I just reload the page, create a new board, and let's add a card, 1, 2, 3, add the card. Oh, I didn't save this, sorry. Reload the page. 4, 5, 6 is going to be the board. 1, 2, 3 is going to be the card. And there we go. So now you can see we have this cursor move here, here. And you can see we have that transparency, that opacity that I added. And there we go. We can add it anywhere. Now, if I put it in the progress, go back and come back here, you can see it's still in the progress. But now there is one last thing missing, and that's when I click on this, I should go to another page, and that's this card details page. And after that, our application is going to be done. Let's implement the clicking functionality for this card. Now, I click on any individual card, then that happens. So after this class, or I could say right, you know what, let's just add it here. I'm going to say on click. When I'm clicking on this, you should navigate to another page. So I'm going to say navigate. Where do I want to navigate to? I want to navigate to, now I'm opening a backticks because this navigation is going to be dynamic. Depending on which card I'm clicking, I want to navigate to that specific page for that specific card. So the cards are going to have different pages, right? Every card is going to have a different page. So it's going to be the specific board ID. Let's pass the board ID here. And after that, I'm going to add another / It's going to be card and then the card ID. Card.id. I want to be navigated to that page. So now if I click on this, you can see we are navigated to that card details page, which we have already created. And how is this the same thing? It's because we actually implemented this. We got this ID to this navigate from our use params, if you remember right here. We passed in the board ID. So this use params uses the same ID as we use in our Redux store. It's the same ID. So this ID that you see right here, this is the ID of this board for routing purposes, for React Router, and it is the same ID that we stored inside of our Redux store. It's the same ID. And I think we are done with this component. It was very fun. We did a lot of different things like dragging and dropping. And the next thing that I'm going to implement is going to be this card details page. The first thing that I'm going to do in this component is I'm going to go to the top. Let's use our useSelector hook from our Redux store. Use selector. And what do we want to select in here? So we want to select the board, and then we want to select that specific card. Now, if I click on any specific card, I want to go to the page responsible for that card. I don't want to be navigated to any other page. So we need to come up with some way to distinguish between the cards or among the cards based on their ID. But first, let's select our state. This is going to be our state. The type of this is going to be root state. Let's just pass it here. And then I'm going to select my board and I'm going to store it here inside of this board. And this is going to be available on state.boards.items. And then I'm going to pass in the board ID. Now we need to select the board ID, and we can target that from the useParams hook. useParams. We have already done this, and I've already shown that to you. So there is a very interesting thing happening here. So if I were to take a look at my URL, if I come right here and let's generate new board, let's create a new board. And then if I try to create card-1 add, and if I go to the card, what we have is we have two IDs. We have one ID, this refers to the ID of the board. And this one refers to the ID of the card, because you can see it comes right after the card. So this one, this 69, it refers to the card. And this one right here, 515, this refers to the board. So there are two things inside of this URL, and this useParams can give us access to both of them. We could select the board ID, and we could also select the card ID from here as well. Let me initialize this, const, come on. There we go. So we pass in the board ID here, and in here it says type undefined cannot be used as an index type. So what we can do is we can pass in the exclamation mark, which in TypeScript is the non-null assertion operator. All right. Now, what do we want to return from this function? We want to return that specific card. We want to return that. So we're going to say board dot cards dot find. Now, which card it is that we want to find? The IDs should match. So the card.id should be equal to the card ID that useParams has given us. Now, the card that this useSelector is going to give me, I'm going to store it inside of this variable, and I'm going to call it const card. There we go. So we have this card right here. Now, let's go ahead and let's come up with the HTML or the JSX for this one. So in here, what I'm going to do is, much like before, we're going to have a section element. I'm going to add a div element in here. Within the div, again, this is just for styling purposes. I'm going to add another div. This is going to be a button. This button is going to have an arrow left. Let's just do this, arrow left. We're going to import this from Lucid React. There we go. So if I save this, and if I come right here, if I click on this, here we are. So I just created this arrow left. And after this button, let's get out of this div. I'm going to create another div. Inside of this one, we're going to have two buttons. So one button is going to say, this is going to have a save icon. Let's import this as well. And this is going to say save changes. You could say the changes or changes, doesn't matter. And then we are going to have another button that's going to say deleteCard. So it's going to be trash2. Import that as well. And let's say deleteCard. This deleteCard is going to be a reducer that we are yet to create. Let's save these. There we go. We got that part done as well. And now I am going to get out of this div as well. I'm going to create a form element. And the reason for that is we have a form. So the form is going to have a title with an input description with a text area. We have a status. And there are going to be 3 statuses or stati. And then we have this text that says when that input was created. So let's go ahead and let's implement all of that. This should be simple for us. I'm going to have one div. Within this div, there's going to be a label. The label is going to be the HTML4. Let's add title for this. And I'm going to add title. Input. It is going to have a type of text. We're going to add an ID for it called title. And the value for this is going to come from the title of the web page. Now, for now, I just want to talk about the JSX. We are going to come back to where the title is actually coming from. All right. So for now, let's just talk about the HTML part. We're going to have another label. This is going to be for description. And it is going to say, whoops, let's just copy it, put it here, capitalize that. There is going to be a text area. We could add description as a name, and I could add description as an ID as well. And let's get out of here. The next one is going to be our status. So div. For this one, we're going to have another label that's going to be status, and this is going to say status. This is going to be a select list. So let's just add status and status. Very good. So how many options do we have? We just have 3 options for the select list. The first one is going to be to do. Let's add to do. After that, we will have in progress. And let me copy that, put it right here, capitalize I, add a space, and capitalize the P. And then we have the final one, which is done. Let's save this. Let's take a look at our stuff. So status is to do. You can select in progress or you can select done, much like what we have here. And finally, we have this text. We need to add a placeholder for that, and that's going to be a paragraph. So a paragraph, and this is going to be created. And for this one, we need to have access to our card. So I could say new date, Let me close that as well. And within here, I'm going to pass in the card dot created at, and then I'm going to convert it to locale date string and call this function. Let's see. Card created. Let me just created. Why does it say create at? It should have been created at. Let me take a look at the types. Oh, here we have create at. It's okay. It's okay. So what does it say? It says no overlap matches this call type undefined as type string or number. So this is going to have a type of string or number. And there we go. That problem is also fixed. Now it has either a type of card or a type of undefined. Let's come right here. We do have this date, and I'm going to get rid of this date, and I'm going to call another method, and that method is going to give us the time as well. So created, let's add a D here, and there we go. So let's pause the video, apply all the styles so we can see everything better, and then we're going to talk about the functionality, implementation of the functionality. All right, all the styles are applied, and you can see it looks quite great. So what do we want to do here? Now we need to be able to change the title, the description, and the status. And in doing so, we're actually making changes to our UI. So we need to have our use state right here. So I'm going to have 3 different use state hooks. We're going to have the first one, use state, and I'm going to explain all of them. So the first one is going to be about the title. Now, if I click in the title and if I try to select anything, you can see I can't select anything. But if you remember, we have a title, so we can go back, arrow left. Let's implement the going back functionality. So I say on click, and in here I call a function, and that function is going to be navigate. And where do I want the user to be navigated? I want the user to be navigated to boards, and that's, I don't want the user to go to the boards, but that specific board. So let's open up our template literals, and I'm going to pass in board ID. Now for this reason, I need to convert this to backticks because I'm using some, I'm actually selecting the value of a variable dynamically. That's why this has to be within backticks. Let's save this. We don't have this navigate, so let me just copy it, come right here. We're going to say const navigate is equal to use navigate, which we just imported from React Router DOM. Okay, so what do I mean? Now, if I go back, you can see we are here. Now, this card has already a title. It already has a title, and that title is 123. And let's just add another one. I'm going to say this is I'm going to say card 456-1. Let's add this. And you can see it already has a title, but when I click here, the title part is empty. Why is it empty? Because this input is not connected to React. Even though it is written here, this input, the value that comes within this input is not being controlled by React. That's the proper way of saying it. It's not being controlled by that. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that it comes from React. Because I'm talking about title at first, that's why I'm just taking that as an example. But this use state, it requires, this is very important for you to understand. It requires an initial state. The initial state, is the initial state an empty string? No, it's not. Why? Because once I am jumping to this page, to this specific card page, there is going to be some sort of a title, and I want to see that title, whatever that title is. And that title is available on the card object. There we go. And that's going to be our initial state for this title use effect. So in here, I'm going to say const, and this could be, we could call this title and then set title. Okay, The first one is done. Let's talk about the description. So now I know initially you create the card doesn't have any description, but you add some description, you go back to the board page, and then you come back, you still want to see that description. So if I add an empty string here, it doesn't matter if I try to add this as a description. I can save this, go to the other page, and when I come back, this is going to be resetted to an empty string. Now that's not what I want. I want the card description. But initially that card description is going to be an empty string. I don't mind that, but I want it to be that I want the value to be dynamic. I don't want it to be hard-coded. And this one could be, again, description. Just copy that, and I'm going to say set description. So this is the second one. And what is the third one? The third one is the card status. So use state. Again, the card already has a status. I want to read that status. I don't want to set it to null or change that. So whatever the status of the card is, by the time I've gotten to this page, that's going to be the initial state of this. And again, card.status. You can see the status of this is to do. So the status of this card is to do as I have gotten to this page. But if I put it in done and now go there, you can see it's still to do because we didn't specify that here. Now, as soon as I specify this, this is going to change. So const, this will be status, and the setter function is going to be set status. Let's save these. So this is the only 3 states that we need for this specific component, and let's start using them. So we add title to this input because this has an ID of title and responsible for the title. This is going to be for the description, and then the select one is going to be responsible for the status. So let's add this. Now, before reading the value of the input from React, you need to give it to React. Then React has the ability to read it. So first you say on change. Whenever the input changes, I want to run a function. And that function is going to be called setTitle, which is going to set the next title. Every time the user types something, it's going to set the next title. And once it sets that, I want to read it, and I want to show it to the user again. That's why we're opening curly braces here, because we're trying to read the value of a variable dynamically. That's why there is curly braces. Otherwise, that would have been some sort of a string. String is hard-coded. It means, again, React doesn't have control over it. And that would make this an uncontrolled input element. But since we want React to have control over it, we're just going to say value is going to be title. And now I just saved it, and you can see card456 has come back. Let's do the same thing for description. In here, we say on change. For this one, there is still this on change. And whenever this on change is fired. Now, again, keep in mind, the first thing that happens is we type within the inputs. And that makes the on change fire. That makes it get activated and listen for the changes. And as we're making changes with every key press, all of those key presses, all of them individually are going to call this on change. And the on change is going to call this set description with every individual key press. And this set description is going to set the value of that input, and it's going to keep recording that. So if you say this is a description, as many letters as there are, those many times this on change will have fired by that time. And then what do you want to do? You want to show that dynamically as well. So you say value description. Because once the set description keeps firing and firing, what it actually does is it keeps updating the value of the state variable. And then if you read the value of the state variable, it is the updated value, because it was updated by the set description method. All right, so this is how this use state is going to help us achieve this. And for this one, right after the classes, I'm going to have an onChange. This is going to be our select select list with 3 options. And we have this event, and we call the set status, and we pass an e.target target.value here. And I'm going to cast this as card status. Let's import card from types as well. Now, once I know what that is, I am going to update the status with that as well. And there we go. So whatever that is, it's going to update it. Now, none of these work because it doesn't matter what I do. So I'm going to say this is, now every time I type, so T onChange fires, and it is going to change, it is going to fire or call the set description. And the set description captures this T and puts it in the description variable. You know, variables are containers for data. It could be any kind of data. So in this scenario, this container has a T, and then it has an H, I, S, space, I, S, and so on and so forth. Description for card 456-1. Okay, now it doesn't matter what I do here is until I give this to my Redux store, this is not going to work because we don't have anything on this save changes button. We need to have some way to give it to our store because that's where we manage our entire state of our application. Now, why did we use state here? Because this is just responsible for changing the UI for us. Okay. So we need to go back to our save changes method. So where was that? Right here. And in here, I'm going to say on click. And whenever I click this, I'm going to call a method, and that's going to be handle save. Let's go up and let's create this. I'm going to create it beneath here. I'm going to say function handle save. There we go. Does it accept anything? No, because we already know what this card is. We already know what this board is because we checked the IDs, remember? Now, what do we want to do here? I'm going to create, we have already done something like this. I'm going to create an updated card. The type of this is going to be of the type card that we imported. Now, I am going to spread all the previous properties of any specific card, but we could add the title, we could change the title, we could change the description. Now, the reason that this is an object, this updated card, but I'm passing just the key. In JavaScript, if the key and the value are the same, you can just pass in one of them. So it's actually like this title. And then the description is also equal to the description. But we don't need to do that. We can just pass it like that. And then we could update the status as well. That's going to be our card. Now we need to send this to, we need to dispatch it to our Redux store. But before that, let me just take a look at this. Some type string, undefined is not assignable type string. Now, the reason for this is because it has these question marks because it thinks that this doesn't exist. And let me just add that. Okay, better. Both of them. There is another way to solve this, but I'm just going to go with this. Okay. Oh, I need a comma there, and there we go. Very good. Now, dispatch. And which function, which reducer do we call? Do we have an existing reducer for this one? Yes, we have this updateCard. So we could just simply call that updateCard, and I import it from here as well. And what do I pass in here? Well, updateCard requires the board ID, which I know, and it requires that updated card that I created. Very good. So we have this dispatch. Let's bring it from dispatch as well. So const dispatch, use dispatch. We import it from Redux Store. So update, type undefined. We don't have a lot of that. And this one, let me add this. Board type string undefined is not assignable type string. Now, another solution to all of this is that if we just assert the type as an empty string, as a string here, that is going to solve all of these issues for us. So we no longer need these exclamation marks. We shouldn't need them. Card is possibly undefined. Okay, that's the undefined. But here it says type undefined is not assignable to type string. Type card. It shouldn't be. This one is solved. You can see it has a type of string. Let me get rid of this. That works. Okay. Updated card. Let me take a look at this. Title, description, status. These ID. Undefined. So the ID has a type of string or undefined. Created at has a type of string or undefined. ID, types of property ID are incompatible. Type string is not assigned. So the ID is not compatible of this card. Handle save. We called it here. It shouldn't be an incompatible. And to be able to solve this issue, what we can do is we could just not spread all the previous properties, but actually get them. So I'm going to say card.id. This is going to be there. And at the bottom, I'm going to say created at is going to be equal to card.created at. Let's add that exclamation and let's save this. So now that that is saved, let's move forward and let's see if it works. So we can already see our status. I just noticed that it has changed from to do to here. I think it was in progress and now it is in done. Let's save changes. Handle save. Button, we say... Okay, this is arrow left. We say handle save. We didn't implement the navigation. Didn't we implement that here? Oh, we should implement it here. So I'm going to say navigate. Where do we want the user to be navigated to? Let's use backticks. Boards to that specific board for which this card, in which this card exists. So this is going to be board ID. Save this. So if I save changes, there we go. So here we are, card 456. If I click on this, we don't have the description. We do have the done. We could change it to do and save changes. Now you can see it's inside of to do. I could change it to in progress and save changes. Now it's inside of in progress. So that's okay. I can say edited. Let's save changes. You can see it's being reflected here. Edited description. Let's save the changes. Let's go back. There we go. We get our description as well. And we could set it to do. There we go. Everything is working perfectly fine. I think the last thing that we need to do here is to be able to delete this card as well. And that's right here. So on this one, I'm going to add an on click. By now, you're pretty familiar with this. So handle delete. I think we have not actually handled that here. So we need to create that inside of our slice as well. But first, let's complete it here. So beneath this handle save, I'm going to create a function that's going to be handle delete. Now, when we delete this, we are going to say, we're going to basically ask the user to confirm that for us. We're going to say, are you sure you want to delete this card? And then if the user is sure, we're going to dispatch a method. And what should that be? We could call that deleteCard. And what do we dispatch here? We dispatch the board ID as well as the card ID. There we go. And once the user deletes this, where do we want the user to be navigated to? We want the user to be navigated to this specific board page. So basically the user should go one step back. That's it. And backticks, we go to boards. From there, we go to that specific board. Now I'm going to click on this delete card. Let's come right here. So after this update card, we have this delete card. What do we pass in? We passed in, well, we do have access to the state, and then we have the action, which has payload action. And in here we have our board ID that has a type of string. And then we have the card ID. Well, we do have the card itself as well. So let's move forward. So delete card. What is it saying? In type. Anyway. So what do we want to do here? Well, we want to make sure that we have our board, much like before. So let me just copy that, put it right here. So on the state, we have options, we have items, and the items that has the payload, and on the payload, we have the board ID. Now, once this board exists, much like before, we need to select the card and we need to filter it out. So the way that we delete this is we are going to only keep the cards for which the ID doesn't match. So if the ID matches, that's the target card that we want to delete. So basically we filter out the target card, aka we delete it, but in the process, we keep all the cards that are not target cards. So it works like that. So we're going to say board.cards, and then this is going to be equal to board.cards.filter. There we go. So we are going to grab a card if the card ID is the same. So if card.id is equal to the ID that we received from the payload.cardID, that means that's the card that we want to delete. And then we do not return it. So we say if the ID matches, do not return it. Otherwise, if the ID doesn't match, keep all of those. All right. Dispatch. Did we use dispatch? Yep. So what seems to be the problem here? We have our state as an any type. In here, am I making any mistake here? So the state has writable draft, board state, delete card, payload action, board ID type string, and card has a type of well, we didn't send card, we sent the card ID, and this is going to be of type string as well. All right, we have this card has an implicitly any type. Let me take a look at that here. So we have this dispatch delete card, board ID, and card ID. Well, we are not importing it, so for now this delete card has nothing to do with this delete card that we have created here. I think the issue is that we've actually gotten out of our reducers object. So let me see where this ends. This is our delete card, right? It ends right here. We just need to go one step up, and there we go. Everything is fixed. We still have this. And okay, we need to import this card, but first we need to export it. So the problem was, as I looked at it, we just went out of this reducers object, and that's it. That's the only thing. That was the only issue. So let's grab our delete card and save this. Let's import it as well. And now we should be good to go. So I'm going to say new card work. I'm going to say test, hit enter. We have new card test, test1, hit enter, go there, test1 card description, and let's set it to in progress, save the changes, and there we go. You can see it comes right here. So I could just copy this and keep pasting it, save the changes, come right here, all of that is here. I could set it to done, it's in done. I could put it in to do, and if I go there, you can see the status is to do because we're reading from the store. So far, as you can see, everything works. Let's check our delete card. So if I click on this, the card is gone. We no longer see that. So let's add another one, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to add 4, 5, 6. Let's add 7, 8, 9, and let's add 000. You can see it's extremely responsive. And let's add that there, add that there, it is, I feel like the dragging is a little bit jerky. Oh, it's because it's changing UI. That's because, yeah, that's because of that. So if I go to 000, it's in progress. We could add the 000 here, and then I could add it here, save changes. If I go back to 000, there we go. And this is the time and the date that it was created. Very good. Let's delete this, hit enter. You can delete it with enter as well. Now I can delete the board, and it's going to delete everything with that. Very good. So I think our Kanban board has come to an end. Let's say board 1. So that's board 1. Let me just create a few boards. This is going to be board 2. Let's add 3. And I really try to explain it as much as possible. I have a lot of faith in your ability at the end of this video, and I'm sure you can just change any part of this application if you want to. You can do whatever you want basically here. So let's say test1, hit enter, and see it works perfectly fine. And that's it for this app. Let me just take a look at my notes. Let's see if there is anything else missing. I feel like I covered all of that. We have one card there. We have the ability to delete a board. We have the ability to delete a specific card. We already took a look at the ability to add description, change this. There we go. You can see it works. Just want to make sure. And then we can delete this card as well, and delete this board as well. And that's it. That's it for this video. I really enjoyed creating this app, and I enjoyed even more teaching it. That's it for this one. See you in the next one.